today I got a group of adventurers with me that we're going to actually join the table. I got to give them the credentials to join, so they got to give
I
them
don't
the
see
password.
your game at all.
Yeah, it's not on yet, so I'm still kind of going through the setup process. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you haven't played before, I'm looking here at the GM side.
For Game Room 1.
And what I'm going to be doing is connecting to the table, and we're going to have basically going to have a kind of like a session where everyone's going to kind of see what I'm doing. I'm going to share the table, all that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and start my game session up, but I have it on, I have the password, it's on cloud and public. So once I get that going, they'll be able to connect to the actual screen here, or to the game. Okay, guys, I just enabled the game, so it's just going to take about a minute to load. And
okay.
You guys your voices are being recorded, just so you know that. The other thing is this is live, so PG-13 if we can help it. And we did
I'll mute myself now.
Yeah, so we did a session yesterday where I kind of did the setup for this. Now we're going to actually get into the connecting to the table, joining the session for the first time, session 0 stuff, and then we'll do like a combat. And I'm going to share my screen in Game Room 1 once I get it up here, and then we'll go from there. So as this is starting up, one of the things you want to do is communicate with your players that they should update their client if you've already done so, or you need to let them know ahead of time that you prefer they don't update in case you're worried about a extension breaking or that sort of thing. And players, if you're connecting to the table, you can just hold tight. So when the table is up now, the credentials are in Game Room 1. And if you connect to the table, just wait a second. Don't claim any characters. We're going to use the character wizard, and we're going to talk about some of the caveats of using the character wizard and that sort of thing. All right, so yeah, so the table's up. If you guys want to connect, you're welcome to. And then I'm going to share the screen, the Discord thing. I'm going to, so you guys can see that and see what I'm doing on the other side of this. So share screen. Oops. So if you guys want to join my live feed in Discord, you're welcome to, and you just Alt-Tab between Fantasy Grounds and the screen so you can see what I'm doing.
I am fortunate that I have enough screens that I can have both up.
Yeah, I'm assuming everyone's got 1 or 2 screens. So
Layering.
Yep.
Yeah, my chat is up for Game Room 1. I failed to see any link there.
You want to look at the gaming basement, not the channel chat, but the actual room chat. So if you're in Discord, you want to look just above the chat channel there where it says Game Room 1.
Yeah, that was my bad. Sorry.
Yep. So the credentials are in there. We're going to go through character creation. We're going to use the character wizard. So anyone that's connecting now will probably end up using a different character, but that's fine.
When we come in, it has the campaign set up and all that. Just close that.
Yeah, you don't really need to do anything with that for now.
Okay.
Yeah, Sundance, you can log in if you want. We're going to go through the character wizard, and we're going to show how that works, because I think one of the things that is very important in any rule set, even if it's Pathfinder or any of these for Fantasy Grounds, character creation is probably the weakest point in regards to managing and running a game. It's something that I practice quite a bit, and it is something that's easily evolving and changing. So even if you knew how to do it 2 years ago, it might be a little different now. So that's one of the biggest things I think that hinders gameplay, is not only is it time consuming, but you're also having issues with technical issues, and then you also have some misunderstandings, and the character wizard doesn't pick up homebrew stuff. So if you're making a custom class or custom race, you'll have problems with that. I mean, there's just all kinds of little quirks and things that can go wrong when it comes to creating content or even building characters. So the character creation process is probably, I would say, if you're going to start using Fantasy Grounds, honestly, I would suggest learning that over anything else, because that's the most pain in the butt process, and that's where things fail and break quite often. So that's probably your biggest challenge, and especially if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, is to you got to be able to help your players. And if you don't build characters and you understand all the little nuances with it, it can be very annoying during gameplay if you constantly have to fix things and adjust things. But it kind of comes with the territory. But you can kind of make it a lot less severe. Let's put it that way. So if you're just joining our chat here, I have a live session up, so if you want to see what I'm doing. One of the things I did in the first video yesterday was kind of lay out the desktop the way that I would normally do in a session. So I kind of have this combat tracker. I got the dice tower already set up. If you want to change color of your dice, you can go over to the top right of the interface and click on the dice icon. And when that window comes up, you can choose from one of the default colors. Unless you own your own dice, then you can use one of those. But players do have to purchase their own dice. That's something that Smiteworks decided early on, is they wanted to monetize the dice. So they said, well, everyone's going to have to buy their own dice. So that's how that works. I could change the dice, something fancy or fun, but I don't really care what the dice. I only have 10 sets in real life. Yeah. So anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to start with character creation and kind of like how I lay out the table. So when you guys first came in, you claimed a character or you just kind of have a blank character. So we're not going to build a custom character through the old drag and drop. We're actually going to use the character wizard. Now, personally, I would use the old drag and drop method because I think that's a better way to go. You learn the interface more when you use the platform in that regard. But when it comes to time saving, and if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, I recommend using the character wizard. It's about 75% good. I mean, there's some things that are broken. I read the forums and I look at people reporting bugs and stuff, and if you report those, they'll fix it. It takes time, but the little bugs and little ifs, ands, and buts get worked out, because there's so many combinations of character builds and different books and different content that I think it's very difficult to build a character wizard that's going to capture everything. So I think that's some of the stuff we'll face when we use the Fantasy Grounds platform. And this is the DnD5e rule set, and this is probably one of the more developed rule sets. Although lately it's been kind of up in the air because we're not sure what's going to happen in the future. And then, you got people that are running lots of extensions, and then you also have, 2 different ways to create characters. So it can get kind of confusing. So we're going to use the character wizard. One of the first things that I wanted to mention is that everyone so far that's tried to connect has been able to. Has anyone not been able to connect when they tried? If you did try, that is.
I got in fine once it showed up.
Okay. So occasionally you'll run into that. And if it's only one player, then it likely is something on their end where they either have to restart Fantasy Grounds. That's one step. The other is to troubleshoot. Basically, you have to kind of learn all the little quirks, and one of them is that when they install the app, they'll dismiss the firewall settings where you can allow Fantasy Grounds through, or they have an antivirus, or maybe they don't have the bandwidth. Whatever it may be, those are some of the issues that you might come across. So they'll have to troubleshoot that. And there's guidelines for that on the official Atlassian guide for troubleshooting for network stuff. But nonetheless, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the characters area, and that's under player, and that's where you manage all the different players on your table. So I'm going to actually take away your guys' characters for the time being. And then I want you guys to go to the modules section over on the right-hand side under library. So anyone connected to the table, you want to go to the right-hand side and open up modules. And then down at the bottom left, we go to activation. And then type in or look for player's handbook. And it does have an apostrophe S. So if you just type in players, it should come up. And go ahead and enable that or activate it, because you're going to need that for your character build. And then also, when you're done with that one, wait a couple seconds and then look for the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, the player's version, because that has more backgrounds and that sort of thing. We're playing in Lost Mine of Phandelver, so I thought it would be ideal to have some of the setting content, but if you're just starting off and you don't have a lot of content, the player's handbook is really all you need. The only reason I'm using the Sword Coast Adventures Guide because Lost Mine of Phandelver takes place in the Forgotten Realms, and there's a lot of themed content in there that kind of goes with the setting. So if you have just the player's handbook, you can get by with that. And to be quite honest, once you learn how Fantasy Grounds works and you understand how to put stuff together, you can actually build all your own custom classes and races. The only issue is if you use the character wizard, it may not pick that up. So you'll have to use the old drag and drop method, which is the method I prefer, but I'm going to show you guys the character wizard. So activate the 2 books. That's the first step. And this is a process that is better served if you do this with 1 or 2 people at a time. So ideally, I wouldn't have everyone joining the table like I am now and have them all trying to activate and download the player's handbook cache at once. So it's better to bring people on 1 or 2 at a time when you're working on characters. And once you're done, you don't have to keep all the books open. The only books you probably will need is the player's handbook and maybe 1 other book, depending on what kind of character they built. So it really depends on your game system, but generally just the core book and maybe the adventure that you're going to run is all you're going to have in your queue for the Game Master side. So I have like a calendar, I have these 5e conditions and effects, I have the adventure, I have the player's handbook, and then I have the player's guide for the adventure, Sword Coast Adventures. That's it. I see a lot of people have like 12 books the whole time. You really don't need a lot of those. And it does help cut down on some of the load and the lag if you unshare some of that content once you're done with it. There is an occasion where you might need a class feature as you level up your character. You can leave those books open. So if you've pulled a subclass or a specialty out of another book, like what is that, like Tasha's or Mordenkainen's, one of those, then you might have to keep that open occasionally. But for the most part, try to run minimally if you can, because this is where a lot of people have issues. They'll just have like a gazillion books active and open. They probably don't need to have most of that. My rule of thumb for myself is if I need more than 6 books, I'm not prepared at all. So this only really pertains to character creation. You don't need a ton of books until you're building and leveling and that sort of thing, but after that you don't usually need everything. And it takes a little while to understand what you're going to need and what you don't need. So it's not obvious at first. All right, so what I'm going to do is, now that all of you are connected to the table, and I see that you all kind of started character, this is a kind of a good thing to show since we're here. If you guys want to look at the screen, the shared screen. So I can manage the characters here as a GM, kind of as an overview. So if you go to if I'm over in the players section under characters. So I have some pre-gens that were already established. And then some of the players who connected to the table started a character here. So what I'm going to do is right-click, and I'm going to click on Clear Owner, and that will release the character back into the pile. So in other words, when you have people who have joined the table, and if they accidentally, claim a character that you were reserving for someone else, you can actually right-click and you can take ownership as the GM. This way, nobody will they won't be able to claim that character, and then you'll have the ability to unclaim it yourself, and then allow the player you want to assign to that player. So this works well with pre-gens. A lot of the times, there's no good way to preview a character when you want to check something out. You have to actually claim it, and then that takes it out of the pool for everyone else. So it's better to do this 1 or 2 people at a time. You got 6 people joining and you got 6 players. Well, the first 2 players are going to claim all the characters because they're wanting to look to see what it has. And that's a flaw, or a feature of Fantasy Grounds I'm not too keen on. I don't like that. But in most cases, when you are just joining, you're going to make a character. So that's usually not a problem. It's when you're trying to share, let's say you made 5 characters for your group. When they first get in, they don't know what's what yet unless you communicate that with them. So it's wise if you give them kind of a breakdown or a sheet or some kind of text that says, okay, these are the characters available, and kind of give them an idea of what they have. Because then when they get on the table, they just pick the character they want to play, and they're not trying to preview it in Fantasy Grounds. Because that just takes away from the pool, and then if someone wants to look at it, they can't. So that's one thing I don't like about with pre-gens with Fantasy Grounds. There's really no good way to preview it without claiming it. So that is something that does come up occasionally. But if you have a character that is owned by someone else, you can right-click and clear the owner. So any questions on that?
No, it's also useful, right, to when you have someone not attend your campaign, you can release it and let another player play that character, right?
Exactly. That's another good point. The other thing is you can import characters. So there is an import button on the bottom. So if someone builds a character somewhere else and it's for this rule set, you can import that character. It won't import the artwork, but it will import everything else. The only issue you might run into is if they created that character with a book that you don't own, and then they go to level up, it's not going to level up properly, especially if they don't own it themselves. So if they made it at another GM's table and you don't possess the same books that were used, when they go to level up, it's not going to pull over the changes that are required as that character progresses. So that's the only I think an issue that you might run into, but I think 9 times out of 10, most GMs have everything. But if you are just starting off and you allow people to bring in their own characters, be a good idea to check to see what content they build it with. Because if you don't have that and they don't have it, then you're going to be kind of SOL when it comes to leveling up. If it's a one-shot, probably not a big deal. But if it's a campaign, that's going to be a problem later on as you go up in levels, depending on when those features are pulled in. So it doesn't happen very often, but I've ran into that where people are like, oh, my character didn't work, or it didn't level up properly, and I look at it and I'm like, well, what did you use? And then they're like, well, I used this. And I said, well, I'm assuming that you own that book, so if you did, I would have enabled it for you. And they're like, no, I got this off of with a different GM. And I'm like, oh, great. So that happens, but I don't think that's a very common thing. But it is something that can come up. So managing characters can be a pain in the butt sometimes.
Something I ran into during my game, the Rin, was very similar in that a lot of these, books with subclasses, if you use the character wizard to create something in Tasha's, and then at 3rd level or 4th level, you're trying to do something and you can't level up with the correct abilities. There's sometimes a conflict, right, between the player's handbook or Tasha's. You have to have consistency. In other words, you have to know which book you use as the origin, and then kind of disable the other books as you level up, or else there's going to be conflicts.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, that character wizard's not perfect. And the other thing is that sometimes you'll have an extension or something that changes the character sheet, and if it breaks and then you disable it, sometimes there's some leftovers there which can cause problems for your table. So be careful when using extensions that change the way the character sheet functions, because if for some reason it breaks and you have to disable it for a while, it can leave behind artifacts that will cause problems potentially. I don't know what those are, but I've run into it before. And I thought it was me, but it was actually some kind of corruption that occurred after the extension was used and after I had it in place for a while. So you got to be careful with the extensions that you use and what type of overrides that they do. So we have our characters connected to the table. I don't think that anyone has their character built, but we're going to go to the character wizard. So if you guys have, does everyone have your books enabled, at least the player's handbook? Everybody good on that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so make sure that's open. That's another thing about the character wizard. If you don't have all the books open in the beginning and you try to build a character and you go, oh crap, I need this book, and you do it in the middle of building a character, it's not going to pull in the proper things. So make sure you have all the books available, shared, activated before you start the character wizard. Because once you start that, it pulls on the records. And if you do that halfway through building your character, there is a likelihood that you're not going to have all the changes that are required to progress. I've seen that where people would open up the character wizard, start building, and go, oh shoot, I need Tasha's now. And you load that up while you're in the middle of character creation. That doesn't work. You need to either start over or just go with what you got. So that is an issue with the character wizard. You got to make sure your sources are open before you progress. Now, some things may show up and may work, but other things may not, like class features, which are basically the things you want. Okay, so go ahead and click on the character wizard button, and you'll get this pop-up. And the character wizard is nice for a couple things. So one, I've timed myself doing it manually, and I've made the save character with character wizard. You probably save about 10 minutes. That's pretty good if you are a game master and you plan on making like 6 characters. That saves you an hour or more. So that's great for that. But for a one-off, I don't think the trade-off is that big of a deal. But if you're going to build more than one character, and character wizard works pretty good, at least to get them started. That's one of the things I had recommended before is I kind of do a hybrid thing. Like might start at first level doing the character wizard, but then after that I might manually level up doing the drag and drop method. So it kind of depends on the group, like how familiar they are with Fantasy Grounds, and then your comfort level with the rule set and such. So this will allow you to build the character in any order. So go ahead and pick your race, and if you need to read about them, you click on it, not the green plus, but if you just click on the text, it'll give you the description. And then once you are happy with the race, and you click on the green plus button. And every now and then you'll have a pop-up where you might have an ability score increase. Some of you will, some of you won't, depending on what you chose. So if you do that drop down, it'll ask you to increase the strength goes by 2, and in this case, or my charisma goes by 1 because I picked the dragonborn. but there's an override underneath that where I can actually switch that around. So I don't have to do the default character select or the race selection stuff in this case. Some races don't have this, or they're going to be a little bit different, but if you guys have an override where you can change the race area or you can change your ability scores, you can do that at this point. Can you backtrack and undo? In this case, you can. So that's what's nice about the character wizard. If you haven't committed, you can go back and you can deselect something and go back and select another one and we'll override it. Excuse me. So that's one nice thing about the character wizard. If you do drag and drop, it commits it as you go. You don't have a choice. You have to start over or delete everything and re-drag the race over. In this case, you do have that ability because it's like it saves it all temporarily, and then when you're done and you're kind of looked over your character, you can go to the commit area and then save it. At that point, you're kind of stuck. You can't really go back, but at this point, this early on in the creation, you can select a new race. So, Elrix, were you able to make your new choice?
Okay. Yeah, I'm on my game.
Okay.
No, actually, I wasn't. I'm sort of still looking at it here. Looking at sub races, and I'm trying to figure out how to go back. So I just close the character wizard, or is that what it...
No. You can just go to can you see a different race?
Oh, change race.
Yep.
And it needs a different color on that.
Yep. So then if you click change race, you should be able to select a different one. Everybody good with race for right now? We're going to go down the order of the buttons on the top of the character wizard. By no means do you have to do that. You can mix and match those. But it's better to try to stay on a linear path so that you can kind of go back and when you check things, you can go, okay, I did this and that. But it doesn't really matter as much as it does with manual creation. In this rule set, you want to do your ability scores, background, race, and class. So think about it as a battle-ready character, and you'll remember that. There is a certain build order for the drag and drop method. But for this case, for the wizard, it's not so critical at this point to do it in any sort of order. But we're going to go across the top here. So let's go to class next. And pick your class. Some of you will get your specialty or your subclass. Some of you won't. So clerics and wizards get that at first level. A lot of the other specializations don't occur until second or third level. So it really depends on the character build. But wizards and clerics usually get their domain or their school right off the bat. The rest of them get it at second or third level. And we'll go through the leveling up process once we get level 1 done. So don't worry too much about which type of paladin you're going to be or which type of fighter, because it's not going to come up until we get up to second, third level. Everybody good on that?
Yeah. Do we need to discuss what we're building?
No.
I mean,
not at all. Okay. I mean, if you're unsure about something, or you want to discuss it, that's fine. But you don't have to explain it, or you don't have to rationalize, why you made that choice, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you want to. Okay, so we're going to go to abilities. So there are different methods of generating abilities. The easiest way is on the very bottom, the override. So if you already have a character built and you don't need to roll dice or do a point buy system, you can just type in on the bottom what scores they are, and that'll override everything. So if you have a character and you want to override the mixed results that you get from your race and your background, You know, those are things that you have to decide, you know, as you're building the character. But what you'll find is that, you know, you'll have the ability to make these changes as you go, and you won't be committed right away when you're building with the character wizard. So that's one of the nice things I like about it, is that it gives you that flexibility, and you can go back and make changes as you're building. So if you want to use a certain method, let's say your GM says, okay, I want you guys to use the point by method. So if you click on the drop down where it says method, go to point by, and you'll see on the second row, not the top row, because that's like your summary. The second row under base, you'll see they all start at 8. And depending on how much you're going to spend to increase will depend on how much the cost is. So if you want to go up to, like, you know, 15, that's going to cost you more in points. And so the points remaining will count down as you click the up arrow under the base selection. And then if you have a sub race, you'll have your under race, it'll show what was added, provided you're not a human or something that doesn't get ability score increases. So let's do the point by just for the exercise. There's other methods too. We're not going to use that today, but you can roll. You can, like I said, you can use the override on the bottom. The override will cancel everything out and use those values. The miscellaneous column is, let's just say, when you guys are done with your point by, let me know, and then I'll go further with this. But you just use the up arrow to increase what you want to build up. And you can go up or down. You're not stuck at this point, not yet. So we're going to select buy out the points. I don't think Fantasy Grounds prevents you from going over the points. So you want to pay attention to your points remaining up there. So that's one thing that's good. And oh, it does. You can't overspend. Okay. Maybe it's only the GM that has that ability to override it. Good to know. So if you're a player, you can't overspend, which is cool. There are some things, though, that Fantasy Grounds won't limit, but that's kind of cool that it's able to limit in that case. So I'm building like a paladin, I guess. And it looks like just about done here. Yep. Okay, everybody good are you guys still doing this? All right, so let's just say I'm going to be a nice GM. I'm going to give all of you who are connected a chance to add +1 to any ability score of your choice. So in the miscellaneous column, you can put a 1 in any of those, not all of them, just 1 point in any one of those boxes there, and increase your score by 1. So I often do that for new players. And I also explain that that's not the normal process. So you can use the miscellaneous to add +1 to one of your ability scores. That's like the GM favor type thing. All right, we all good? Anyone having problems with abilities? All right, so we're going to go to background. Now, being that we loaded the Sword Coast Adventures guide, we have a bunch of other additional backgrounds. This is why I loaded that in. And this gives you more choices. And some of the choices are themed, or most of them are themed for the setting. So they kind of make sense for the Sword Coast. If you were playing a, like a generic or maybe a different game or rule set, this might vary. But in this particular case, we're going to play on the Sword Coast. But you might use Kobold Press or another third-party product. They may have their own. So you'll have the base ones that come from the player's handbook, but now we're getting all these additional options because of the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. And up at the top left, you'll notice that if one of those has a exclamation red, that means you have other options, or you could have potentially doubled up on one of your skills. So if you're given skills for your background that you pick, and they kind of coincide with maybe you already have that coming from your class or your background, it will stay. It'll stay like in that state until you make another selection. So that's one nice thing about having the character wizard, is it doesn't allow you to double up on skills. When you do the drag and drop method, it's easy to forget, and then you drag something over and you miss out on an additional skill. So at 4th level, technically you should have 4 skills or more. If you don't, then you probably doubled up somewhere. The character wizard helps mitigate that. So if you accidentally pick something you already have, that exclamation mark will show up, and you just go back and make a different choice. So that's one of the benefits of using the character wizard. This was very problematic in the classic days. A lot of people didn't understand that when you drug over the background, it would clash with what you already have, and there was no mechanism to warn you that you've already made those choices. The wizard kind of takes care of that part. So once you've selected your skills and your background, we're going to move to the equipment phase. So anybody stuck or lost? Okay. So equipment. So on the top there, up by the coins, you have starting wealth or starting kit. So we're going to do the kit. With the wealth option, you're going to get a bunch of gold. You can buy everything. But the kit is going to give you kind of a preset of different choices. So you need to pick, you got it like 3 or 4 choices, maybe up to 5. And you can pick the starting equipment for your character. So choice 1 will likely be a weapon of some sort. Choice 2 might be like your secondary weapon or a missile weapon, depending on the build of your character. And then you'll have some kind of pack, and then you'll have probably an extra thing. Depends on the choices you made. So I'm going to make some choices here. So I have a flail that I chose for I'm making a paladin, dragonborn paladin. Now I kind of want I'll go with a spear. And short sword, and then I'm going to do the explorer's pack, and then I want the reliquary for my holy item. So once you make all your choices, all that stuff will be written to your character sheet once we go to the commit area. And if you notice, for the equipment area, you'll have your starting gold up there, which comes usually from your background. If you wanted to add items, there is a drop down for add. So I'd like all of you to click on Add Items in the equipment area, and I want you to type healing under search and just go ahead and pick a potion of healing. So I'm being nice. You all get to start with a potion of healing. And if you look towards the top underneath your equipment coins, you'll see the choices you made, the current inventory. If you want to do a do-over, you can click the change method or reset. Don't do that if you don't want to reselect everything. So you can reset it, which is handy if you got someone new that doesn't know what they want to pick, and then they go, "Oh, I don't want that," you know. You can always manage this later. So if it doesn't go well, or perhaps you're not happy with the starting gear and you want to swap something out, you can ask your GM about that after the build process. It's easier actually to manage it from the character sheet than the character wizard. So I just let them pick the main stuff, and then we'll fine tune it as we go after we get beyond the character wizard. So anybody stuck here who need more time, or? All right. So let's go to the commit screen. So this is the final thing. You look over your summary. I don't know if armor was part of one of your kits or not, but if you're worried about it, just go to the add area and just search for it and then add it to your thing. Some backgrounds and classes, they do give you that, but it could also be the wizard giving us some guff there. So, okay. So, yeah, if you have problems like that and you think it should be fixed, report those in the forums and they'll get around to it. All right, so you go to the commit screen, you type in your name, and this is kind of the point of no return. So once you hit save, it's going to write all those changes and options to the character sheet. So at this point, you want to review. You want to make changes. If you need to, go back and click on any of those buttons and make your changes now. So if you're not satisfied with your summary, go back and make all your changes now. Alexa, alarm off. Okay, so once you're happy with it, go ahead and click on save, and it should pull up your character sheet. It might take it a second because it's got to write all those tables, but once you do that, that's basically your character. And at this point, I would instruct my players to select a portrait. So on the top left corner, if you click on that little blank spot, you'll get a picture and token pop-up window. And you just click in the portrait and go in and pick something that you would think is appropriate. If you want a good starting point, maybe the FG, fantasy, or whatever content, you can also assign your own. So if you have Fantasy Grounds set up the right way and you have your own portraits, you can select those if they're in your portraits section in Fantasy Grounds. But if you're new, you'll just have to use whatever the GM gives you, or you can email them and say, hey, I want to use this for my portrait picture, and they can put it in for you, however you want to do it. But the portrait becomes your token if you do not have an actual 3D top-down like token. So the portrait kind of becomes like your default token. So it'll assign that depending on what you pick. the GM can alternatively go in and assign a top-down token, like a 3D one if they wanted to, or a different variation of it under this flat area. But for the time being, let's just worry about the portrait for now.
I apologize for dropping like that.
It's okay.
I live in an area
Timbuktu?
Well, it's rural Arkansas.
Yep.
We have power issues. Sometimes we have too much. Sometimes we don't have enough. And they either, let it drop or send us a lightning strike. Just take care of that.
Someone asked, do you know why custom dice sets resets to a default? I do not know. If you're trying to pick one or a color, make sure you hit OK or confirm it.
Yeah, no, it's not that. It's,
okay.
You select custom dice and 10 minutes later it defaults back to the solid black. You change it again, 10 minutes later, solid black. So,
I don't know why that would be.
All right, Laren, I was in the middle of creating a character when my power went, and I don't see the character here now.
Okay.
Do I just start over, or did it?
You'll have to start over if you lost power in the middle.
Okay. Well, that's always exciting. Oh, man, I've got to bring up books and everything, don't I?
You might. It depends on what was saved and what wasn't. So that's a good point. Fantasy Grounds saves every 5 minutes. However, if you're in the middle of something and Fantasy Grounds is writing to your hard drive, and then you decide to close out of it, or in this case you have a power surge, you're likely going to have corrupted data, or at least it's not going to record the changes. So when you need to exit Fantasy Grounds, the right way to do it is to right-click on the desktop, click on Exit Session, and then you would click on the Return to Launcher. That's the best way to do it. If you're concerned that it's not saving or something like that, you can, in the chat window as the GM, you can do a / and then type the word save. And that kind of forces the save. But this is just a precaution that you might do if you make a lot of changes in that 5 minutes and then you exit out while it's in the middle of saving. That's when you get that data corruption. There is a way to recover from that, but you're going to lose some work. So if you have a campaign that you've been running for a few days, you're likely going to have a couple sessions where you can actually go back into the folder and go to the DB session and rename it to db.xml and get rid of the old one that's corrupted. That's how you restore part of your work. If it's a brand new campaign, there's not much you can do about it because you won't have any restore points unless you did the save thing.
All right, so I apologize. I dropped out. I've got the race and the class picked.
Mm-hmm.
I chose a domain.
Yep.
So now I just move on to abilities?
Yeah, it might ask you for spells, so you might have to pick your cantrips.
Oh, spells. There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
So just pick a couple cantrips and a few spells. I wouldn't worry too much about what exactly they are.
Okay.
In this case, we're just kind of going through the process. Get a couple cool spells like healing or something, but you don't have to worry about every little single thing. So as he's building his character, I wanted to, if you guys want to take a quick break and look at the screen, this is something I recommend if you're a new GM and you kind of want to keep your desktop clean. So right now I have the characters. They're up here on top. I don't have them on the combat tracker, so I can do that now. So I'm going to take and drag each player onto the combat tracker. including mine. And then the party sheet is another spot where you're going to add the players. So this is something you do in the beginning. So this way you can manage the characters as an overview. What's really neat is that you can do group roles. So let's just say that out of these characters, let's say that I want them to do a strength check as a group. So maybe they're doing tug of war against a hill giant. So I might say if they make 3 rolls over a certain number, or a strength check, let's say a giant made a strength check and he rolled a 19. So 19 is going to be the skill check that they need to beat. So in a tug of war situation, I would leave this out in the open so the players can see it. And then I can click on the little dice here, and then these are visible, so show results is on. So the first check is going to be for that initial pull when you first start doing tug of war. And you could say maybe it's a series of 3 checks or 4. You do initial check and then you do 3 in series to see if they gain or lose ground. So for the first round, we're going to roll, and I'm going to say if at least 2 or 3 people, depending on the number of people in your group, if they beat that number, then you either hold your ground or you know, it depends on what they roll. So you can make that up if you want. So I like tug of war. So what we can do is I'm going to click on this. And it looks like nobody rolled over that. So in this round, you're going to lose 5 feet, or 5 or 10 feet, and then the giant's pulling on it. So now we're going to roll again to see what happens. And what we'll do is keep track of where their position is. If they lose 2 in a row, like right off the bat, and they haven't made any ground, they're going to go into the pond or they're going to lose. So if they don't win this round, I'm going to say they lose. So, or you can do 3 rounds or something like that. Best out of 3. So we only had 1 player, so that's basically a loss. Now, if that player rolled a 20, I might say, okay, you held ground, or something like that. So let's do 1 more roll, and if they lose the tug of war match. So the number to beat's 19 in this case. So what this looks like is you guys tried your best. You guys first did okay, and it just got worse, progressively worse. And because we're missing a person, aka Shipwreck, we don't have the full group here. He wasn't ready for the tug of war in this case. So he was putting on his armor or taking it off or something like that. But nonetheless, we lost that tug of war match, and we end up going into the water or falling on our faces. So you can do something like that if you want to use the party sheet to kind of determine like a group roll. The other cool thing is like a check. So I'm going to actually turn off the show results because I don't want the results to show up here. And instead of saying, okay, everyone, I want you to roll a perception check, I'm going to do it here behind the scenes. So I'm going to go with perception. And this way I don't have to announce it to the party. I could, but I don't want to. And then the DC challenge rating in this case is that the scenario or the context is that the players are trying to sneak past a checkpoint. Or, maybe they're leaving Neverwinter and they don't want to be seen. Like they don't want others to know when they're coming and going. So they're going to try to sneak out of the city at night. Well, normal guards have a 12 or 11 or 12 for their passive perception. So I set that value here, which is the number they need to beat. But a perception roll is something that's not exactly pass or fail. Well, it is in some ways, but I'm going to roll it behind the scenes. So if you guys want to watch that, I'd have the hidden roll results on, and I'm going to click on the die here. And you guys will probably know that I rolled, but you won't necessarily see the results. But what I'll do is dictate or narrate based off of the success and failures of the rolls. So, Elrix, you walk up towards the gate to get outside of Neverwinter, and you kind of saunter on by, and you bump into something, or your armor or whatever, hits something. You go, oops. So the guard kind of looks at you like, okay, he took note of you. Hodor, in this case, you're able to use that distraction to your advantage, and you just kind of slip by without being noticed, at least from your perspective. Calix, you failed utterly. Your armor squeaked, so they knew. Yeah, sorry, first day learning to walk. Yep. Claren, the one-shot cleric, you have just kind of squeaked by. You're able to get by. That distraction helped you guys get through. So based off of the number to roll and the degree of success or failure, I narrated that based on that without telling the individuals the numbers. So that's a way you can use the dice tower and the party sheet to your advantage. So if I would have said, okay, everyone roll perception, then that would have immediately told them that there's something going on, or kind of tips them off. And on top of that, if they see other players rolling with different numbers, they might play or react differently. So it kind of sets up like a metagaming situation. So my rule of thumb for myself, you guys don't have to do this, but anything that's physical, like strength checks, dex checks, I usually allow those to be rolled in the open, whether they do it from the character sheet or I got to do it as a group roll. Anything that's mental or perception or anything like that, I usually roll that depends on the situation, but in most cases, like perception isn't something I think that should be broadcasted or allowed to be shown, because people will change the way they behave based off the number. So if the number looks low, they might say, well, crap, this isn't going to be good, and they'll respond differently. So it kind of I'd rather narrate it and tell the story than just do pass or fail or use numbers, because that's okay once in a while, but you really want it to be more immersive. So instead of just giving the pass or fail or saying, okay, you rolled a 17 or you rolled a 13, that's okay occasionally. Like I might tell someone, hey, you rolled a 20, or something like that, but I don't normally broadcast those type of numbers because it kind of steals from the immersion, and it kind of sets up a metagaming situation. For example, if you had a rogue, they were trying to pick a lock. You're under stress. You're in a hallway with a locked door. You've got like 12 zombies slowly coming towards your group, and you're like, hurry up, and he's trying to unlock the door. I say, okay, make a skill check with your lockpicks, and if you have that announced in the live, they actually see the number. If they see that number is high, they're going to think, okay, he's probably got it. If they see that the number's low, they're going to respond differently. So that should not be the case. It should really go off of, me describing that he's fumbling with the lock and they hear a break, and something like that is more immersive than just pass or fail or a number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, here's a question. So imagine your party's trying to stealth sneak past a guard group on the other side of a low wall, for instance. So they're crouching, going, and 3 of the 4 pass, but the 4th one failed. I mean, there's really nowhere to hide. I mean, in that case, do you adjudicate the entire party basically is found out with the guard basically hears one, he hears them all?
Yeah, you could do that. And what by doing that behind the scenes, you have more flexibility on that. So you can override the rolls and just do that. If you roll in the open, it looks kind of hokey, like you're just kind of bypassing the actual rolls. So when you roll in the back like that, you kind of have that fudge factor where you can rule that without question. You won't have people say, oh, well, I rolled a high number, how come they saw me? Or something like that, So I think this is something you'll have to decide as a game master and as you get familiar with your your players and the rules. But this isn't really something you could teach. It's more like base it off of experience and base it off of what the situation is. And there's a lot of calls that you're going to have to make that go against the rolls. So using that dice tower occasionally will help you with that, and it gives you more flexibility on how you want to run your game and not give the players or anyone any sort of doubt. It's all smoke and mirrors. So it's nice to have that option. You don't have to. You can have everyone roll in the open and just say, hey, that guy made noise, you're all spotted. But when you have the rolls out in the open, it gives people kind of oh, that's bullshit. You'll get that occasionally, and I don't even want that seed of doubt, because then they're going to say, well, this guy doesn't know how to fucking run a game, or excuse my language, but that's kind of the thing I try to avoid sometimes. But anyhow, the party sheet is very handy for running games, because not only can you do this overview, because you can look at their armor class, their perception, you'll know who has dark vision, who doesn't. You can see their overall inventory. So whenever they build a character and they add or take things away, you can hit this refresh and it'll rebuild the inventory. It'll tell you who's holding what and how much gold they have and those sort of things. And you can also use this to manage loot. So when they get treasure, you can drop the parcel in here. You can decide at some point if you want to sell it, or if they're going to hold on to it, or someone who's going to claim it. You got all kinds of options here to do your loot. The order tab has kind of been updated if you haven't played in a while or you're new. So the watch order doesn't do anything mechanically. But what you can do is you can assign a number to the watch order to get a rough idea of who's watching first, who's watching second, and then just divide that by 8 hours, and you kind of get a rough idea. You can also pair people up. It doesn't have to be an exact number, but essentially that gives you an idea of who's going to be staying up, and if you have an encounter that occurs like at a certain time of night or sometime in the evening when everyone's resting, you'll have an idea of which player was active or on duty at the time. So you can do stuff like that kind of to help you kind of decide who was awake and who wasn't. So I would assign the watch order just to kind of have a rough idea of who's watching when. So if you got 6 players and you divide that by 8, everyone's got a little over an hour shift. So you can kind of so you're probably going to need at least 9 or 10 hours to actually rest if everyone's going to get rest and you have one person watching the camp, unless you have an extra NPC or somebody that's doing that for you. So those are little things like for exploration and that sort of thing. The watch order itself, you can set up a default formation. So when you want to drag your players to a map, you kind of have them already set in a certain way. So we might I don't really have a good way to do this, but I'm going to just set these up and so you get an idea. So this might be your formation. So when you drag this little helmet onto a map, that's basically the way they're going to face, and this little arrow up here indicates the direction. If you want to change direction, like maybe they're going to the east or west, you can change the facing. And then there's some presets here for auto-filling the columns for different types of presets. And then you can also clear the formation, and that gets rid of it. So you can kind of manage the formation before you put them on the map. That way you know that this is how they start. Like maybe they have a formation for outdoors and then one for like narrower passages, like for dungeons and stuff. So that's kind of just esoteric stuff. It's not as important, but it can be if you have like a trap set up, or maybe there's a trigger that's happening when they open the door. Those sort of things come into play. So it's nice to have the formation, the watch order for those types of things. I don't think it's critical for running the game, but it is a tool you can use to help you manage your game. So this is kind of an extra thing. I don't think it's necessary, but it can be helpful depending on how you run your games. So, are there any questions about the party sheet for the order tab and the watch order?
I'm just curious a little bit on the watch order, other than like a battle encounter, just some things other DMs might sneak in as just interesting things to happen on the watch.
Yep, and that's why I assign the number, because if it happens at a certain time in the evening, like past midnight or maybe right before they wake up, I can tell who's awake or who's supposed to be awake at that time. That may change the outcome of things, depending on who's watching. Usually I'll have them in pairs. If I have 6 people, I'll do like 3 groups, and then they have like a 2.5 hour shift or something like that. So it depends on how detailed you are in regards to running your table, and how you handle exploration and camping and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's watch order kind of just gives you a standing point, and you can talk to your players about that and say, okay, who's going to take first watch, who's going to take second, is this the normal watch order, that kind of thing. That way you have something to fall back on if a timing thing comes up. Or that the shipwreck here, he's number 6, so he's the last one to take watch, so he's probably going to start the fire in the morning, unless you guys already have someone doing that. So that maybe you have an NPC or something. But essentially, that's kind of how I do it. And then the Elric's, I got him going to sleep first. So, or I got him watching first while everyone goes to bed. He's kind of putting stuff away, getting more firewood, that kind of thing. So there's different things that can occur during that, 12 hours or whatever rest time you have. All right, so we'll move on. The XP tab is where you're going to award your players either encounter experience points or quest experience points. Quests are more like milestones or goals. Encounters are more like combat, disarming traps, that sort of thing. So those are something that you can reward during the, during the game as it progresses. So some of the things that I've done in the first video is I made myself this little run list. And this is for session 0, so that's kind of what we're doing now. We went through character creation. Was there any questions or problems with that character creation other than a little bit of confusion on the order and stuff? Okay. So if you want to look at the screen, the actual GM screen, the one I have shared in here, what I'm going to do is bring up each character. And if you are a character that I want you to go to your actions tab and take a look at your ammo if you have ammo, and make sure you type in a number there. Maybe you have 20 arrows or 2 spears or something like that. And then in your actions tab down at the bottom, you have a different mode. So for this case, for standard mode, this is generally the basic mode, the default. This is where, when you're building your character, where generally you're going to be. If you click on preparation mode, this is where you're going to set up your usages, like how many times you can use stuff, and also memorize your spells and or assign the spells that you have readied. So the preparation mode allows you to set up a usage type thing. And we're going to come back here and add the potion here, just as an example. But this is essentially how I would set this up. So if you look at the way I have the table laid out, I have my combat tracker, and then the characters, I'm going to stack them in the same group on the right-hand side of the combat tracker. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. And if you're left-handed, maybe you got it all the way over on the other side. It depends. But I like to have the characters close to the combat tracker and the dice tower. And I usually put it to I'll click on the actions tab. So I have a quick access to the player's items, so I can kind of see what's going on. And I don't necessarily want to babysit and handle everyone's character, but I'll have it there So when I need to look at it, you know, I don't have to open it up and it be in the middle of the screen. And that's the main reason I do this. So if you are new to Fantasy Grounds, whenever you open a new window that you haven't opened before, it's smack dab in the middle of Fantasy Grounds. So after that first initial opening, take and resize the window, put it where you want it to go, and the next time you open it up, after you've closed it, it'll stay where you left it, unless you've moved it. So what I have right now is this deck of cards here, is what I call it. And on the combat tracker, I'm going to select Elric's, as he's the first one on here. It's round 0 right now, so you're not in combat or anything. And if you click on this link on the right-hand side, it's going to pull the character sheet up to the top. And this is a very, very good way to go, because you're going to have the ability at a glance to quickly open up that character sheet without having to move it, without having to, you know, have 6 of them across. You can only look at one at a time anyways. Very rare do you need it like this where you have to compare, unless you're switching stuff around. So keep all of your NPCs and your players in the big deck of cards, the ones that are on the combat tracker, and then you click on the link on the right, and that will bring that up to the top. So that will help you when it comes time to looking at your characters, or if you have an NPC, you click on this link, it's going to bring it up to the top. And that's really probably one of the better things I can show you for Fantasy Grounds on the interface, is to start setting up these windows the way you want them. And the other thing I might do, I don't have to do this, but I could take the link from this combat tracker and I have a note here that's going to have all my campaign notes. I'm going to drag the characters and drop them on this list here. So this isn't necessary, but I just do this for myself. So the reason I do this is when I come back to the table and I don't have the combat tracker up. Let's say I just got to the table and I don't have anything going. So I have this cheat list, and I set this thing up in video 1. So if you didn't watch the first video, I kind of go over why I set this up. But essentially, I can click. When I come to the table, it's going to be kind of empty. I'm not going to have anything going on. So I'll bring up my session list or my cheat list here, and then just start clicking on these links. So that's something you could do to help yourself. And that brings all this stuff back up where I need it to be when I get ready to run the adventure. So some of these kind of got out of order. But the idea here is to get everything located where you want it. So when I did the first video, I did all the setup. And then now this is session 0 that I'm preparing for. So we got all the players here, and I got all the things that I need to run this session, all on this little run list here. You could use the shortcuts on the bottom, but I try not to fill those up with those. That's why I do this note here, or you can do a story entry. And this kind of gets everything, once you place it, like for instance, this map. Once I have this placed and I have the window set to the size that I want, then I'll drag that link over onto my cheat list here. And then the next time I need to bring it up, I can go to my cheat list and bring that up. So let me see, do I have the map? Yep. So there it is. And then this thing here is session 0. So if I accidentally close this, I can bring it up. So I have my session actually linked to the map because we're going to start in Neverwinter. And then the map is also linked to my session 0 note. So if I accidentally close it, it's right there. I can just bring that up. Or you can put it in the hotkeys below if you want. So use the power of that linking and those shortcuts to your advantage to help you organize your campaign. You start learning that, you put stuff in certain places, and you always do this for every campaign you do or every session. It gets so much easier. I don't know how many times people have complained about the interface. Well, they haven't even tried to use it the way it was designed. And when you're fighting with it and you're constantly moving windows around and stuff, yeah, it's very frustrating. I think the first 2 years that I used Fantasy Grounds, that's all I was doing is fighting with it. I was getting pissed off and moving stuff. And, every time you open a new window, it's going to be in the middle. So, for instance, I just open NPCs for the first time. It's right in the middle where you don't want it. That's just a default behavior. But the next time when this opens, I want it to open right here, not in the very middle of the screen. So if I close it and I go to open it again, it's going to be where I left it. And once you understand that, it makes it so much easier to manage. And I think that's one of the biggest fights, other than character creation, is managing this information. And that's one of the things I teach in these lessons, is to kind of learn to manage with the tools that you have. People complain that you can't break the windows out and stuff. Well, there's not much we can do about that. But what we can do is manage the windows, and it will help you with your flow, and it will help you with your process, so you always know where things are. You're not having to come over here in the campaign and dig up all this stuff. It's not that hard to drag some links over onto a cheat list and then just size up your windows where you want them to go. And then next time you need it, you just click on the link, it pops up the window. What's nice about these windows is, for instance, if I get a little overlap here, not a big deal, because if I click on the window underneath, it's going to bring that up. If I need to look at the map, it's going to bring that up. As long as you have a little bit of space to click on it, you can bring it back up. If you're fighting for room, you can collapse the screen or this menu on the right-hand side. You can collapse it down again, but I would recommend only if you knew the interface. So you can gain an inch there if you need more room. I usually have it collapse to this first one at the most. I don't ever do that because I need to see it a little more. I got old eyes. So this is just getting used to where you're placing these windows. Think of them like cards or as like a little portals here. You can size any window on the bottom right corner, and then you can drag them by clicking, left clicking and holding, and you can shortcut these links by left clicking and dragging them either to the hotkeys or to another record, however you want to do it. But this makes it a lot easier when you come back to the table. The other thing that's new in Fantasy Grounds, I went over this in the video from yesterday, but there is a setting in the options, and it's called Desktop Restore Windows on Start. By default, it's turned off. So you want to turn that on if you want to take advantage of having it to where this will all come back to place once I leave the table. So if I leave this up and I exit the table, it's all going to come back the way I left it. That's very handy. But I still make my own little cheat list in case, let's say I'm done and I've closed all this stuff out for one reason or another. I'll do that because I'm kind of a clean freak. I need to have a clean space sometimes. And I might do that during the course of the adventure and then exit out and forget about it. And when I come back, these are the only two windows that'll come back. So that's why I have this cheat list. And I used this before that was even available. Before that option, because it used to be called Windows Saver or Windows Saver X. It's built into Fantasy Grounds now. You don't need an extension for that anymore. But that's a handy thing because then you can kind of pick up where you left off. So any questions about that? This is probably the biggest takeaway here, is to get this interface to work for you. Run the game. Don't let it run you. And I mean that in all sincerity. You really have to kind of put time into this and get an idea of how it behaves. Once that occurs to you, it gets so much easier. You get character creation down and managing the stuff that you're going to be using, it's so much easier. And then you can start seeing the power of the platform. But if you're going to fight, complain, and add a bunch of crap and not know what it does, that's going to take a long time to wrap your mind around this tool. So it's almost like equivalent to having a new toolbox. Let's say it's a brand new toolbox and you got like a gazillion different things in there. You don't even know where to start. Well, how does this work? How do you hold the tool? What does it go on? What size does it need to be? All that stuff. That's kind of what you're going through, especially if you're new to this platform and you're new to the rule set and you're new to Discord and you're new to everything. So those things add up and it can get very frustrating, very time consuming, and it can really make it to where you don't even want to play. And that's really what I'm hoping to kind of help with a little, is to kind of give you the tools or the ideas and you guys take it from there, because that's really hard to teach that. How do you tell someone to be organized? I mean, that's kind of up to you and as an individual to do that. It's hard for me to tell you how to run your game or, how to do it. I'm just showing you what I've learned. You can take this information or you can tell me to shove it. But I'm just giving you the best information that I know personally and from experience and from making a lot of mistakes. And this whole thing, this whole community was built on, using and worrying about what you can control, not the stuff that's not there. A lot of people complain, oh, it can't do this and it can't do that, but you're not even using what it can do. So, I don't have a lot of sympathy or patience for that. If you're not willing to put in the time and effort, then forget it. Don't even use it. But you got to put your time in. You got to get used to how it behaves. You got to learn the limitations and then start piling on the features and the extra stuff. Because what I'll see is like the biggest mistakes, I think, for Fantasy Grounds, especially as a GM, too many options, like too much crap loaded, huge maps, and you pile on all these extensions and extras. And when you do that, it's really hard to learn the system. And if something goes wrong, you don't know how to address it, especially in the middle of a game. So what I'm trying to show you is to keep it simple, build on your experiences, learn from your mistakes, and figure out a way to use the tool to your advantage. Use it for what it is. You can't control what it's not. And I guarantee you, if you spend more time worrying about what you can do and less time about what you can't do, you're going to be successful with this program and with your games. And that's really what I try to teach mostly, is to use the tool, figure it out, play with it, learn those limits and what all the cool stuff. And it will be a really fun thing for you. Or you can be one of those individuals that piles on 50,000 maps that are too big and, they have like 70 different extensions and they got 20 books open just in case. You're not going to need half of those things. You really just need to start focusing on the session, not something that you might need or something that you're going to need. Worry about what's in front of you and things will get a lot easier. I'm very passionate about that because that's the truth of it. This whole community was founded on frustration. I don't know everything. I just know what not to do. And one of those things is, if you're not willing to put in the time, you're not going to learn the platform. It's going to be difficult to use. It's going to be clunky, and you're just going to get pissed off and go do something else. And that's the truth. So we're going to take a minute for questions, and then I'm going to go into a combat. You guys can simulate that with me, and we'll show you how to run a combat. Any questions, you guys? Comments? Complaints?
It's been great so far.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you're saying on the character sheet there,
Mm-hmm.
you have at the bottom there, you've got the just beside your that part down there.
Yep.
On the player side, that doesn't show up unless
What
I'm
doesn't?
looking at the wrong tab. Is it Skills tab or is it
Actions.
Actions tab?
Actions.
Yeah, I don't got that.
You should. Is it covered or something?
No, I scrolled right down to the bottom.
Why don't you close the character sheet and then reopen it? Maybe it is a glitch.
If you're not a spellcaster, it won't show.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Actions tab should be there regardless.
Yeah, I know. I had to actually drop the spells on manually because it didn't give me anything for Bard.
Okay.
That's probably what it was.
Down below, you have the mode. Are you able to change that?
Nope.
Huh. Do you have it covered or something?
Nope.
That's really weird. Are you sure you're on the Actions tab and not one of the other?
Actions just highlighted it. I see the spell slots. I see Bard actions. I see spells and cantrips, and I see the spells. That's as far as it goes.
So you're Shipwreck, right?
No, Elric's.
Okay, let me look at that. So if you look at my screen, I can see that stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to switch it out for you just to see what it looks like.
Oh, man, I gotta resize that.
Now can you see it on the bottom under mode? Are you able to see it now?
No, I gotta scroll it up here. So there we go. Nope, it's not showing.
Huh. It could just be blocked data or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have any extensions that would do that, so I don't know. My guess is you might have to disconnect again and reconnect. It's probably your bandwidth or something going on. Or it could be a cache. Sometimes your cache gets corrupted. I don't know what causes it, but every once in a while, like you'll have someone on a map or something weird where it doesn't show. Sometimes when you disconnect and reconnect, it'll clear that, depending on what the situation is.
Well, Alex, he just dropped, but
yeah.
what did it mean that his bubble was light blue and everyone else's is black at the top?
Good question.
Oh, I just set it that way.
Huh.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it's toggleable.
Yeah.
Yep. So that gives me the ability. So if I was using measurements on the map or whatever, then you'd see mine show up as that color.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that's you can change that. So if you want to go into the settings in the options, and then you go to color active character, it's probably a black circle. You can change the color. So when we go to use the maps, or you roll dice,
there it is. Okay.
And that might be what, some of the confusion there. Now, did that come back up, Elrix, the bottom there?
It did come back up, yeah.
Okay. So my guess is that some of the data was dropped. You may have had, are you on a wireless connection?
Literally 5 feet away from my router.
Right, but you're on a wireless connection, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can get dropped packets. So if you don't have a direct Ethernet, occasionally that'll happen. You'll get some drop packets, and it'll corrupt the data. So that's something that if you're a GM, kind of keep that in mind. It's better to be wired in. I realize that not everyone has that luxury, but it is better for the host to be connected for that very reason.
All right, so I did something dumb.
What?
When I created my character, I did not include a weapon.
It's okay.
I didn't pick it.
All right.
Well, hold on. I started looking through my character, and it had that weapon listed, and I thought it was a mistake, so I deleted it.
Uh-huh.
And then I was looking at my inventory and realized that I'm the dumb person. So how do I put it back in?
The weapon or the The item?
It's still in my inventory, but it's not
okay.
on my weapons on the action tab.
So make sure it's equipped. So on the equipment page, go through and make sure that cycle through the icon and make sure it's equipped. So it needs to look like a shirt.
Yep, it's equipped.
Okay, now go back to your actions tab and see if it shows up.
Nope.
Huh. Again.
And I am wired.
Yeah, again, it could be one of those stupid anomalies. So close your character sheet, then reopen it. And then in your inventory, make sure that it cycle through the equipped and unequipped thing a couple times. That may fix it.
If you cycle, it should fix it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Well, it didn't, and that's because I'm special.
Okay, so again, bandwidth issue more than likely. So I would disconnect and reconnect. And it's good that this is coming up because this is the kind of crap that you're going to deal with as a GM. And I'm not singling you out. This happens at least once per game. And it has to do with the network and how things work in the, back and forth. The data goes back and forth between my table and yours. And if it doesn't get updated, it will, you'll have that problem.
No, I just assumed it was because I did the dumb thing and it was being a challenge.
Yeah, well, that's a good assumption, but I don't think you did anything wrong. I think it's just the same kind of problem that Elric's had. And I noticed, Elric's, did you intentionally disconnect?
Yeah, I just popped out, came back in just to see it, and I confirmed that I got the mode combat display actions.
Okay.
It's all set.
So this is something that a new GM or someone who's been playing for a while should know that how to troubleshoot this stuff. Now, it can get more complex if your firewall and your antivirus are blocking. So this is something you're going to have to get through.
All right, that did not fix it.
Okay, so drag over, go to items. Go back there and search for something and drag it on your sheet. And I also noticed you don't have a what do you call it?
That's Elric's. He needs to re-choose his character.
Yep. Yeah, Elric's, you got to go pick your character again.
Oh, the image?
No, you've got two, or you did have two.
Oh.
So which one is which? I'm going to
that one there.
Okay. So wanted to make sure you have the right character.
I thought when I came back in, it would give me the control of the character again.
You got to select it.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so Shipwreck, did you drag something over to your
what I did
equipment?
Is I still had it in my inventory, so I went to items under campaign.
Yep.
Pulled up the club.
Yep.
I drug it over. I drug it over on weapons or on actions, and it didn't add it.
Huh.
And so I, at the bottom in the right corner, I hit add weapon, and then I tried dragging it to that line, and it didn't add it.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds to me like bandwidth issues. That stinks of that. So I've fixed the club on my end on your character sheet to 1 instead of 4. Did that fix that? Did that show on your sheet? Okay. See, that's what I'm saying. There's a delay in here too.
Yeah, okay. So that does say 1.
Okay. Now I'm going to cycle through it because right now I see that you cycled through it, but I'm going to do it on my end. So hold on a sec here. So this is no longer carried.
Yep.
That is only carried.
Yep.
And now equipped.
Yep.
Okay, now check your actions tab.
Nope.
Wow. Yeah, I can see it's blank up there too. It's not even showing on this side either.
No.
Do you see your mace and warhammer?
Yeah.
Okay, are you sure that Maybe that item is fucked up. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
But
I
you
can see
have
the
your-
changes on my sheet as you're making them.
Yeah, so that's good.
So,
But you have a shield, and you have scale mail, and all that. So that's what you really need anyways. Maybe that
yeah.
item, the club itself, is broken.
Okay.
But as long as you have those 2 weapons up there and your armor and stuff equipped, you should be okay. I don't know what was wrong with that club.
I don't either.
But these are little things that you'll come across while you're playing. If you have any issues with bandwidth or something that isn't created properly, or maybe you have an extension that's messing things up. So that's good to see this stuff. Now, on your weapons, on your actions tab, some of you may have a one-handed weapon, which you'll leave at 1 for the little hand that's next to the die there. Some of you might have a two-handed weapon, or you might have a case where you would have use of either single or 2 hands. So the spear, the warhammer, battle axe, longsword, trident, and there's one other. Those are versatile weapons. So if you switch it to two-handed for those particular weapons, you'll get more damage out of it. So that's a property of the weapon itself. So the only caveat to that is if you're using a shield, you should technically unequip the shield from your inventory if you're going to use a two-handed weapon. So that could be a crossbow or a bow. You know, any of those things, you would go in and go into your inventory and unequip it. But some people forget that. I don't think that's something that most people would remember half the time. Because you're in the middle of battle, are you going to go in and unequip your shield? Probably not. Especially if you're new. You know, you may not know that. But if you're going to use a two-handed weapon, that's the real deal there. You're supposed to not benefit from the armor class of a shield. So you could make an effect on your character sheet that would cancel that out temporarily and make it a little bit easier to remember. But technically speaking, you're supposed to go in and unequip it and then use your two-handed weapon. But it's very inconvenient. I don't think that's something that most people want to deal with. All right, so I'm going to have you guys make sure you're on the Actions tab, and down below where it says Mode, change it to Standard, and then Display as Group. So at the bottom of the sheet, we're going to add just a potion just so you can see how that works. So on the very bottom right corner, there's an Edit List, so you want to click on that. And then you want to click on the star, which is going to add a new power. And on your Actions tab, you should see a new header that's blank that says Powers. So we're in the mode where you have, your Actions tab, and then you have, that sort of thing. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to, on the right-hand side where it says Powers, I am going to type in consumables, because this is going to be where we're going to put the potion. But you can call it whatever you want. It could be potions, whatever you want to designate. So on the right-hand side, that actually determines the name of the group. So right now it says powers. On the right-hand side, type in whatever you want to call it, and then click on the left-hand side where it says new spell, and it will update the title. So instead of saying powers, now it'll say whatever you designated. You guys following along?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to add the functionality of the potion of healing. So we're going to right click, or actually let's type in healing potion in that blank cell. So healing potion. We're going to right click, and then you'll see an arrow called add action. When you click that, you'll get this radial menu. Click on the add heal, which is that little plus symbol. And it'll make another line underneath, and we're going to actually edit that line. So you get out of edit mode on the bottom there. You click on the little pencil on the bottom right, and you'll see a magnifying glass across from the heal. You guys see that? It's underneath the other. There's 2 magnifying glass. The second one will access the heal function. And you should get a window that pops up that says spell/ability heal. You guys following? You may have a problem with that?
I'm with you.
Okay. Let me know. Okay, so what we're going to do is a healing potion. If you need to know the properties of it, you can go back to your inventory. You can click on the description of the healing potion in your inventory if you put one in there. And it'll tell you what it does, how much it costs, that sort of thing. So it says you regain 2d4 plus 2 hit points when you drink this potion. So we need to set that up as a heal function. So we're going to do that by the desktop where your dice are. Pick up the left click and pick up the 4-sided, and then right click, and that'll add a second die, and then just drop it into the box there where the spell ability heal is. And that should add the 2d4. So you're going to take the virtual 3D dice, left click and drag, right click with a mouse, and that will bring in the additional die, and then drag and drop it onto that window. So there's your 2d4, but that thing said 2d4 plus 2. So where it says bonus, type 2 in there. And then the properties of it, we're going to leave it as targets. If you put it on self, that potion will only heal you. So if you want the ability for it to heal another person, you leave it on targets, because you can drag the potion to another person provided in the game you're close enough to them, so that you can either hand it off to them or heal them, and then that gives them the ability to heal. So if you change that to targets to change it to self, you're only going to be able to heal yourself. So now on your actions tab, you should have the potion, and you'll have the action set up there. You can collapse that by clicking on the magnifying glass that's on the top, and that will kind of suck it up and kind of collapse it so it's not expanded. And then down at the bottom in the mode, I want you to change that to actions, or combat, excuse me, and then display as actions. And this is kind of what you want, where you want to be when you're getting ready to play. And we're getting ready to do that. I'm going to put you guys on a map, and we're going to whack a couple goblins and call it a day. So you guys following along? Everybody good?
I'm with you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So that's just kind of a basic thing if you need to add stuff to your actions tab. I'm not going to go over tons of that stuff because it's going to take too long. But just kind of give you an idea that you can customize character sheets. You can add your own stuff to it if you need to. All right. So make sure that your tabletop is set up kind of like mine or something similar when you're getting ready to play. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the DM side of this and get the combat encounter set up. So this is something I would have done beforehand, before we even start. But in this case, I got to explain it, go through the steps, and kind of show my process. So I'm going to add some stuff to my session 0 thing, because really it's going to be session 1. Normally in session 0, we're building characters, we're fine-tuning them, we're getting to know, we're setting up our schedule, all that kind of stuff. Session 1 is when we're going to actually start playing. So I'm just going to pretend that this is my session 1 notes and add some stuff to it. Normally I would make a new entry. I don't want to waste too much more time. So right now we got all the players on the combat tracker, which is important. And in this particular adventure, Lost Mine of Phandelver, there's a reference manual that I've already bookmarked and located. So if I bring this up, this has the actual adventure set up down here on the bottom. And I go to part 1. Here's all the information. It talks about goblin arrows, and it just kind of suggests that you guys will be escorting a wagon full of provisions. Then it's going to go from Neverwinter to Phandelver. So that's kind of the premise or the start. It's assuming that you're starting in Neverwinter. You don't have to, but as the GM, if you don't want to do a lot of extra homebrew stuff, then you can go by what it's saying here, which is to basically suggest that you're in Neverwinter, at least to start. I'm going to share a map with you guys. So I'm going to bring up the Sword Coast map. And on the player screen, I'm going to share this with you. So as the game master, on the top left corner of any given image, you right click on that and you go to sharing. You click on that and you get this radio menu. So you can stop sharing or you can share the record. So I'm going to share the record. When it comes up on your screen, resize it, put it where you want it to go. It'll probably be right in the middle of the damn screen, but that's normal behavior. So I just went ahead and pushed that to you guys. If that pops up, resize the window, put it where you want it to go. I have mine on the upper right corner, and you don't need it expanded all the way out. You just need enough to view it. This is a regional map, so it's not really strategic. So, you know, having it zoomed in perfectly is probably not necessary. And as the GM, I can see who's looking at the map on the bottom left corner of the image. So I can see all who's accessing the image. So if one of you closes it out or it's not shared to you, I can tell. It's really hard to see, but down on the bottom left corner of the map is the status of the people looking at who has the map open or not. So there's some things I want you to realize with maps, and we'll get into that, but a lot of times players will accidentally close the map. We'll deal with that shortly. So I have the regional map. We're going to be starting in Neverwinter. So as the GM, I can make little pointers if I need to. So if I hold down both mouse keys, and players can do this too, if you hold down both mouse buttons and you drag, you can make, pointers. So that's where we're going to be starting. So if you guys want to do that, you can hold down both mouse keys, or you can right click and go to pointers, and you can draw a line, you can draw a circle. This is also how you deal with your spells. So if you wanted an area of effect, you can draw out a circle or a cone or a square. So this is just so you get used to, as a GM or a player, using these pointers. So one of the complaints about Fantasy Grounds is they don't have a way to ping the map. So this is your kind of your alternative to that, is to make these pointers and point at where you want to go or what you want to point out on a map. And you notice it took on the color of your dice or your selection that you made earlier. So that's how we can differentiate between who's who. So if you've got multiple spellcasters, you'll have a kind of an idea of whose radius or area of effect there is. So any questions on that so far? And if you want to remove it, you can just right click, go to pointers, and then you can say remove pointer. Like that. You can, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but that's how you can clean up the area. So you guys are starting in Neverwinter. Your whole mission here is to get from A to B. It takes about a half a day to get to Phandelver, provided that you don't run into any issues. And the journey takes, take your time, but hurry back type thing. But essentially, your hosts, Sildar, Hallwinter, and Gundren, Rockseeker, are kind of like your patrons. One of you might know them, but they've given you this job, and you guys are kind of looking for work. So in the city of Neverwinter or nearby, or maybe in another town, you found out about this job. Maybe it was on a notice board and you signed up for it. Now you guys are basically going to be traveling together along the high road heading south to Phandelver. So this is basically what you're going to be doing for the first part of this adventure. So now it says in the DM section, it gives you the details. It says read the box text when you get ready to start. If you create a different adventure hook, then you just skip this section. But I'm going to go ahead and share this out. So there's a little chat bubble. So if I click that, that sends over the DM narration for this particular scene. So in this it says, in the city of Neverwinter, a dwarf named Gundren Rockseeker asks you to bring a wagon load of provisions to the rough and tumble settlement of Phandelver, a couple of days' travel southeast of the city. Gundren was clearly excited and more than a little secretive about his reasons for the trip, saying only that he and his brothers had found something big and that he'd pay you 10 gold each for escorting his supplies safely to Barathan's Provisions, which is a trading post in Phandelver. He then set out ahead of you on horse. So he left you guys to gather your supplies and such. And he has an escort, a friend named Sildar. He's going to claim that he needed to arrive earlier to take care of business in Phandelver. So you've spent the last few days, now this assumes that you're leaving. You've spent the last few days following the high road south from Neverwinter. And you've just recently veered east along the Triboar Trail. You've encountered no trouble so far, but this territory can be dangerous, so that's something that may have been mentioned in roleplay. If your GM was on top of things, he might have mentioned that to you. But basically, bandits and outlaws have been known to lurk along this trail, so you kind of have to be alert. So this is your beginning stages here. So at this point, running this adventure, if I did some homework, I might even set up a small little encounter. Even though it's not part of the adventure itself, I might actually set up some bandits. Maybe like 2 guys come out and harass you guys, but then you guys talk them out of it. Maybe they're not much of a match for you guys, and they surrender or they take off. So it doesn't have to be combat, right? It can just be an encounter where somebody comes up to you. Maybe they want to sell you something, or maybe the bandits are pretending they're caravan or something like that. So you can kind of introduce the element of danger, and you can do a little foreshadowing without actually doing an encounter. You can do it more of a narrative thing. You guys say, well, along the road, you guys saw a couple of people standing behind some trees off to the right. If the players insist on going after them and killing them and doing a murder hobo thing, you can allow them to pursue these guys. But what I would normally do in that case is I'd just make it kind of inconvenient for them. I wouldn't say, no, you can't follow them just because I don't have anything prepared for it. What I would do is play along, and I just do it narratively. I might even say, hey, you guys need to make some checks. These guys are hiding. Do some things like that until where eventually the appeal of chasing these guys down in the wilderness isn't so fun. And that's something you'll have to learn on your own, like how to handle those things going off the rails, in other words. You could make a deterrent table, which is something that I recommend, or some kind of mental note that you always do when these things happen, or something you go to. So a deterrent table might be something you roll randomly or something you pick, or maybe you have a list of things. But I would theme like maybe 4 or 5, 6 different things that can occur to people when they go off the rails, such as chasing people down off the beaten path. So one could be they lose their weapon, or they trip and fall, their food gets spoiled. Maybe they hear the growl of a bear, something like that. Just little things like that to kind of deter them. So that's what I call it, as a deterrent table. And after a couple of those, they're probably going to get the clue that it's pointless and go back. So you might waste an hour or half an hour, but that's part of the game. You can make it fun if you have some ideas of what to do in those situations. So being that we're on this road, so we already know there's bandits. There's probably wildlife, so there's another option to create another encounter. So if you do want combat, maybe they have to fight a big bear or something like that, or maybe a pack of wolves. So you could do that to test their mettle and to see how they operate together before you even get into the adventure, and make it really low level and really simple, and make it so they succeed, so that they're not discouraged and they get a little bit of experience. And then you teach them how to use the interface and how to use their character sheets at that point. So that's kind of an important thing, to kind of slowly introduce them into the adventure before you start dumping stuff on them, before you get into these planned encounters that are part of the adventure. So this would help you for yourself to make sure you're organized and you got your crap together, but also gives you the ability to test everything out without impacting the narrative of the adventure so much. You can make it lore friendly. You can say that these bandits were guys that got kicked out of Neverwinter because they're not very good, nice people. Or you can say that the animals in the area have been under distress, and maybe they're having a hard time finding food because of a bad winter, or maybe they just woke up out of hibernation. There's all kinds of things you can do to kind of make it more lore friendly, but it doesn't always have to be combat, right? You can have a thing where they're kind of chasing around, they don't get anywhere. Or maybe they have to end up camping because they wasted so much time out there that it's getting dark. And then maybe at night they have a strange sighting or a weird encounter with some kind of animal that's making weird noises and keeping them up all night. So then they just have the rest of the day, the next day, in kind of a foul mood because no one got any sleep and they're all tired. And you might apply exhaustion to them, which can be could be a lot of not very advantageous at that point. So having these types of things in mind when the party wants to leave your plan is helpful, and that comes with experience and also knowing the content. I mean, I can probably whip out an encounter pretty quick without spending too much time. Maybe I'll take a short break. I'll say, okay, everyone, let's do a bathroom break. As a matter of fact, let's do that. So in real life right now, everyone take about a 5-minute break. I want you to be here at 5 minutes after the hour, and when we'll come back and start looking at some combat. How's that sound? Everybody good?
That works. Thank you.
So
That's
use
good.
the restroom.
It's like you're
have
reading
a
my
cigarette.
mind.
Yeah, have a cigarette, whatever. And that's exactly what you want to do in real life too, in game. You got to give people breaks occasionally. So let's come back here at 5 after.
All right.
Hey, how's it going? We're taking a quick break, so if you're watching, we'll be right back shortly in a few minutes. But it's important to give people a chance to take a break usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'll take a break and we'll do 1 or 2 of those depending on how long the session is. So it's important for that to happen because people need to reconnect with their outside world, go have a cigarette or take a drink or whatever, get water, whatever it is they need to do. You got to provide those breaks. I've ran sessions where we went 4 hours straight, no breaks, and I didn't know it had 2 people holding their bathroom break. So it's important to do that. It's something that you'll learn as you're running the table. What you need to do to help your players and yourself. And it gives you a chance to kind of recollect. And if you don't have to go to the bathroom yourself, you can do some more prep, that kind of thing. You use that time to kind of get everything set up. So it's kind of up to you. But I'm not going to do that because I want these guys to see what we're doing and get an idea of how to set these encounters up. So we'll be right back in a few minutes, so hang tight, go get some water, go take a break, go get a cigarette, whatever. And when I get done with this video, I'm not going to edit too much of it, but I will put in bookmarks. So hopefully within a week or so, I'll put in some jumping points or, some video bookmarks or timestamps so that if you're watching this in the future and you want to go back and look at it, there's parts that you don't care about or you want to switch, get away from. Try to do that about within a week after I post the video, and hopefully that'll be helpful to some of you because I know you don't want to go through a 3-hour video trying to figure out what content you want to see. So I'll put in some timestamps after YouTube does its thing because you can't do it right away. You kind of have to wait for it to build the transcript. So that's kind of annoying. But yeah, so I'm not going to edit the video because I kind of want to keep it raw. But as far as later on down the road for accessibility, I will put in some bookmarks to kind of touch on, some of the topics that we're going over. And I think that'll be helpful for the community in the long run. We did a part 1, so if you didn't see the prep setup that I did in part 1, there's another video out there I did yesterday for about an hour, so that's already up. And then I'm going to link that video to this one. So, all right, so we're going to head back to the game now. So we'll see you in the game. All right, folks. So there's something I wanted to show you that I forgot. I'll wait another minute, but you can change the status of your character on the top left of the corner. So if you wanted to set like your AFK, you could do that. So if you click on or right click on your token or your portrait on the top left of the interface, you can set AFK. And then you can also whisper to another player. So if you right click on someone else's thing, you can send a whisper. And then as soon as you start typing or whatever, that AFK status will go back to normal. So you can do that as a courtesy to your GM and your players to let them know without interrupting the game flow. You can just do that, and then when they get to your turn, they're like, "Oh crap, he's not even at his computer." So that's a way you can do that. I mean, to announce that in the middle of a combat or something, probably not very fun, but you can set that AFK without being too disruptive. All right. So that's a way, and then you can whisper to other players by right-clicking on their icon, and you can, talk crap about me or whatever you want to do. The GM has the option to see those conversations in the settings. So when it says chat, let's see, where is that? There's a way that the players, I can look, show all whispers to GM. If I turn that on, I can see what you guys are chattering about. I don't care. I leave it off because I don't want the extra text in the chat window. So I don't even bother. But if you're really worried about metagaming and people talking bad about you, you can turn that on if you want. But in this case, I don't really care. I'm just going to leave it off. The other thing that's kind of cool about Fantasy Grounds, and I don't know if a lot of the other rules, virtual tabletops or games do this, but if you want to speak a certain language on the chat window, you can use the drop down, and if you have the languages on your character sheet, you can select the language, and then when you type something in chat, it's going to come across as gobbledygook if the other player doesn't have that language in their repertoire. So other than common, if you speak Dwarvish and no one else does, they're not going to know what it said. So I'm going to try to pick, I'm going to do something kind of weird. So I'm going to type, this is Ignan language. So in the chat window, you'll probably just see some gobbledygook unless you have that language on your character sheet. So this is a role-playing tool that you guys can use occasionally amongst each other. Or maybe you have like a party of elves and then you got some outsiders and you don't want the humans and all the other people knowing what you guys are talking about. So you're kind of assumed that, others can't speak the same language. But you have to change it back to either blank or common in order for people to see what you're typing if you're going to do real life stuff or out of character. No, it's not a feature available in image creation. Nope. So the GM can see all the translations. Players cannot. So that's just a little thing that's kind of cool, unique about Fantasy Grounds. All right, so make sure that your character sheet is in the position you want it. Make sure all your gear and your weapons are set up. If you have ammo, make sure you add that. And then you want to go to, if you're a spellcaster, make sure you've prepared your spells. And if you are a sub-race, maybe you have a special racial action or effect. Like for instance, I have the silver dragon, so I'm resistant to cold. So on your actions tab under combat, and then change the display to actions, if you have any abilities that are passive, like for instance, I have resistance to cold. So if I enable that, it's going to put that effect in the combat tracker. So if you're a dwarf, you might have like a resistance to poison, or if you're an elf, you might have Fey ancestry. Whatever it is on your character sheet on the actions tab, if it's something that's passive, like that should always be on, before you start playing, those should be enabled. So make sure that you have those activated. Not everyone's going to have those, so it just depends. So there should be a little button that you can activate if there is some sort of effect or something or a note that should be enabled. So you want to do that at the beginning of the game so that you can benefit from those. Some of you will have that, some of you won't. I don't know how many times I've played for 2 sessions and I forgot to turn on my dwarven resistance to poison, stuff like that. It might have helped you at some point too. A lot of them are just notes, like they may not do anything mechanically, but at least it's a kind of a little notation on the combat tracker that tells you something and kind of reminds you. So even if it doesn't do anything mechanically, it's there to kind of remind you and the GM that you have this ability active. It's usually like role-playing stuff and that sort of thing. It may not actually do anything mechanically, but role-play wise it might. You guys following along? Everybody got that? So for instance, shipwreck, you can click on the Dwarven Resilience. So on your, and if you look on the Actions tab, it should be on. I don't see it. Let me look at that, make sure it's set up right.
It's right there.
Okay. Yeah, it hasn't updated on my side yet. There it goes. Yep. So that's what I'm saying, like this bandwidth thing, it looks like some of that data is not going back and forth. All right.
Well, isn't that going to be exciting?
Yeah. So I'm going to shut down the combat tracker, reopen it. Sometimes that will help too. All right, so that is just a preliminary thing that you want to remind your players to do before you start the game. And normally, most of those you leave on the whole time. There are some abilities or effects that are, limited by the number of, turns or usages. Like, for instance, I have a dragon breath thing that I can use, but that's like an attack roll. So, yep, stone cunning, that's another one. Now, are you clicking on the button or dragging that to your, because you got to make sure that if it's not set to self, it won't apply to you.
Well, on the Actions tab, under Race Actions Effects, I've got the Dwarven Resilience and Stone Cunning there, and I use the little star to the left that says Use Power.
Yep, you can do. Well, that actually doesn't do anything. There's a button that needs to be pushed.
So the one on the right?
Yes.
All right. So that one says
there
self.
There you go.
And this one says self.
Yep, that's how you do it. Just like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah, those little buttons on the right are the ones that actually do something. Some of them are just effects, some of them's attack roll, some are damage, some are healing. Just depends on what it is. All right, so the next thing what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the adventure a little bit more. So we're on our way to Phandelver. So this module gives a pretty, that's why I'm using Lost Mine of Phandelver, is because of the way it's written. It was set up for new GM. So any of the starter box sets, even like with Pathfinder, they have a starter set. This is going to help you with the minutia of getting used to running games, and it's written that way. So this is saying that you take a few minutes to encourage the players to introduce their characters to each other in game. So like role playing. You also have to think about how your characters came to know the patron, the dwarf, whether it be through drink or blood. Maybe you can concoct your own stories. Like, how do you guys know Gundren? Where do you meet him? That sort of thing. If you're kind of hard pressed to think about anything, I could come up with something for you, something simple. For instance, Gundren could be a childhood friend or someone that had helped you guys get rid of in a tough scrape or something, something like that. The exercise is a way to give an opportunity for the players to contribute to the adventure's backstory. And that's really what this is all about, right? That actually is more important than killing goblins, because in a collaborative storytelling type thing, you kind of want that investment. Otherwise, it's just a strategy game where you're going into each combat and just kicking ass every time with no names taken and no hardly any role playing. So there are games that are like that. They're supposed to be that way. But in this case, you want a mix of both. You kind of want the role playing and the combat. You don't necessarily want one over the other. When you are advertising your games in, let's say you want new players, make sure you discuss that or mention that in your posts. So if you're going to list a game or invite new people that don't know you, that haven't played before, make sure you give them the mix of what you're comfortable with for the game. You're not going to always know exactly, but you're going to say, well, I'm kind of more heavy on combat and less on role play. So you might say something like that, or 60-40 or 70-30. And then you always got to have a little room for exploration. So that's going to different spots on the maps. That's getting resources. That's like, talking to people in town. those sort of things. You need a little bit of that too to kind of help with the role play experience and for the immersion. And you do that by sharing images, by setting up like an interactive store. You can do that in Fantasy Grounds where the players can essentially shop for themselves. I'm not going to go into how to set that all up, but that's a whole nother topic. But you can do stuff like that to kind of make things easier on yourself and to increase the storytelling aspect and to kind of keep things in context.
Question.
Yes.
Does Fantasy Grounds have the ability to play sound files?
No, but it does have the ability to trigger them. There's a difference. So when you do set up sound, it basically sends text to an outside website. So if you use Sirenscape, for example, when something happens in the combat tracker, it sends a link to Sirenscape. And then Sirenscape, or whatever player you're using, will trigger the sound. And your players will be able to hear that through the shared, they have a web player. So basically a web browser pops up for them, or if they have it open. And when that sound plays, it'll play through their computer. They can control the volume. However, if you try to trigger it on your computer, you have to route that to your players, either through Discord or some other third-party means. So it's not as simple as just sharing the audio. It depends on how it's set up. And like I was saying earlier, when you have a browser-based virtual tabletop, such as Foundry or Roll20, all that stuff is handled in the browser. With Fantasy Grounds, all it can do is send a HTTP command to whatever, whether you're using it locally or with a service, and then it has to still be piped to the player or played through a web browser type thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it's pretty cool, frankly. I mean, I use it a lot, and it adds a lot of dimension to the game. When the wizard casts a fireball, it makes fireball. When we miss, it misses. When we hit, it hits. When someone dies, it clangs a bell. So it adds a lot of dimension. If you're ready to set it up, like Loren said, it's worth, I think, exploring.
Yeah, get the basics down before you jump into that, because when you're managing that and then you don't really know what you're doing in Fantasy Grounds, it can be annoying. And it just could add a lot of heartache. So make sure you get this stuff down first and then start adding that up, because you're already a storyteller. Now you're adding the DJ thing, so you kind of have to take it in chunks instead of doing it all at once. But yes, you can do that. It's just another step, another adding more to your table, more to your plate. So pick your battles too. I kind of stopped using it because it annoyed me, because what will happen is if you don't set it up a certain way, whenever somebody swings a sword, it's the same 3 sounds over and over and over. I got tired of that. What I really like is actually just a little bit of background music. Really light in the background. I kind of appreciate that more than all the sound effects. Because I know a couple times I've had that same fireball scare the living crap out of me, because the volume level is different. And quite often it's pretty loud unless you turn your volume down all the way or really low. So I don't know. I kind of got annoyed after a few sessions. Players loved it. I got tired of it.
Specifically, I've got some friends who like to play characters for me.
Yep.
So I want to be able to play their voice for my group.
Yeah, you can do that, but it's going to take some work. Okay, it's not as cut and dry as you'd hope.
Okay.
Okay, so anyways, back to this. So the wagon, they give you, like in this adventure, it gives you some details about the wagon, which is nice, because quite often when you're given a quest like this, they don't give you the details in the adventures. The DM has to come up with that. In this case, they do give you some details. So it says any character can drive a wagon, and there's no particular skill necessary. However, if you want to get into it, there is a skill called Vehicles Land. So if you have that as a skill for your character, you can make rolls and checks and stuff if that's applicable. In this case, you're probably just leading the wagon, and if you get tired, you might hop on and kind of take a load off your feet. But in general, this isn't like a horse. These are like ox pulling a wagon, so you're not even going that fast. And that's probably why they said that. So there's 2 oxen that are pulling the wagon. If no one is holding the reins, the oxen will stop where they are. So one person at least has to lead them. So I usually ask the players in this particular situation, like, who's going to lead the animals? Are you just going to trade that off? And then who might trail? So maybe someone's watching the back. And then maybe one person is in the wagon, to rest. And then the rest of them might be on the flanks, on the left and right of it. So it kind of depends on how you want to run your table. But I usually try to get an idea of where they're at in case. It may not matter, but I always kind of want to know, what that might look like in case something does happen. And something does. The wagon is packed full of an assortment of mining supplies and food. So that's what's going to the store. It includes 12 sacks of dry flour, several casks of salt pork, 2 kegs of strong ale, some shovels, some picks, and crowbars, about 12 each. There's 5 lanterns with a small barrel of oil, which is about 50 casks in volume, or flasks in volume. And the total amount of the cargo for the money is about 100 gold. So it gives you that, which is nice because now I don't have to, try to figure out what's the wagon, what's going on with it. A lot of times they don't give you that. They just say you're escorting a wagon. They don't tell you the particulars of it. So in this case, the way this adventure is written is like, I wouldn't say they thought of everything, but they certainly, gave you more than they normally would. And that's why this adventure is good and why those starting packs are good, because they usually have that kind of stuff in place for new GMs and players. So this way you're not burdened with trying to come up with what's in the wagon and how much it's worth and how much does it weigh and all that other stuff. And that stuff probably won't come up, but if it does, it's nice to have that available.
There's 44,000 of them, and if they are put off by the opponent tenor.
Hey, Mike, can you silence your mic, please? Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go to the next piece. So the first section of this goes from Neverwinter to Phandelver, and it's just kind of an opening thing where you're kind of getting used to each other. You're traveling together along this road. You might do a little role playing, whatever. If someone asks about the wagon, there you go. You got all that information. So the next section is when an ambush is going to occur. Now there is an image that is part of the adventure. I don't think I would show the image until later, till after the encounter. There's some goblins that are going to jump out at them. But I would probably show that image later. I wouldn't necessarily show it now because the ambush hasn't occurred yet. But you can click on an image that's inside of the reference manual, and then you can right-click on this little link, and you can share this out. So normally I would wait, but I'm going to do it now. So I'm going to share the image. So when you share these types of things, this is meant for more immersion so the players can get an understanding of what they're looking at, especially if it's something complex. This is more setting the mood. Again, I wouldn't show this before the encounter, but I wanted to show the process of it. And then when you're done with this image, after maybe the session, you go into your images section. Yeah. And then you look at the stuff that you've already shared. So if you go to images and there's a filter, let's see. I'm going to go to the Lost Mine of Phandelver, or I can just leave it unfiltered, but there's an all button, and this will, yes, I can close it remotely. So what I'm going to do that now, I'm showing that. So I have the Sword Coast map shared, and I have this goblin artwork. So I'm probably going to leave the map because we'll refer to that more often. But when I'm done showing this image here, I don't really need to keep that shared with the group. This image is still going to be shared back and forth, even though we're not looking at it. So that data is cached. It's not going to take as long for it to download once it's shared. But once you don't need that anymore, you click on this little letter P here, which is public, and that will unshare the image. And that also helps free up resources. So if you're having memory issues and you've already done like 4 or 5 sessions, go into the images, look at what's shared by clicking on this button here. And this will help you manage which images are shared and which ones aren't. And you can unshare them after each session. That way you're not sharing a bunch of images that don't need to be shared, and you're kind of lessening the impact of the amount of bandwidth that's needed. Because quite often as your campaign grows, you're going to share more and more images. If you leave all those shared, it's going to add up over time. The first few sessions not going to matter, but when you start getting to the end of the game there, and you've got like 20 different maps shared there, that's a problem, or it can become a problem. So unshare the content that you don't need. Manage it as you go. Don't wait until your system comes to a halt, because it can. If you've got too many books and too many images and tokens and all that other stuff, it's going to start slowing down. So unshare the images as you go. You don't need that goblin image every session, right? You might share it occasionally, but it's not something that's going to stay. A regional map like this, I'd probably always leave that shared. Or something you return to all the time. Maybe it's a town. Might have that shared, but you don't need to have all the maps and all the handouts shared if you're done with them, if you don't plan on returning. So that's just a tip. So this is something that you want to do if you're going to, manage a long-term campaign. One shot, probably don't have to worry about that. But when it comes to a long-term campaign, yes, you need to manage your resources. And that's how you do it. So any questions so far? So we're leading up to the combat.
I'm good.
I'm sorry, this is a very roundabout way, but some of you wanted to know all the little things that go into this, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's really good, actually.
If they close the map now?
You could. And I want to...
Yeah, no, I was going to say if the player closed the map, that map that you're showing, so I closed it on my end, how do they open it back up?
Okay, so for instance, this map, this big map here, I could take this link and drag and drop it onto one of these characters. So do any of you, some of you, who dropped the map? Who was that?
I did.
Clarence?
I did.
Hodor? Okay. So I'm going to take this little link and drag and drop it onto your token or onto your profile. Did that bring it back up for you?
Yep. Perfect.
That's one way to do it.
That's good.
Okay, that's one way. And that's also how you could share an image to one person instead of the whole group. So maybe you have a rogue that's scouted ahead and they see something. You can share that individual with that picture before the rest of the group sees it. Or you can even show a different variation of the image. So maybe the rogue has dark vision and the other guys don't. Maybe you have an image that only shows part of the map and the other one shows the whole thing. So you could do stuff like that if you need to. Or maybe it's a note that was only made for the rogue. An assassin or somebody in the Thieves Guild hands him a message. You can drag that image, which would be like a handout, to just that player. And they can read the note. And they can decide if they want to divulge the information or not. So there's a lot of cool little role-playing things that can be done there. The other thing you can do is if you're a player or a GM, you can left-click the link up there and drag it to the hotkeys. So I would recommend that for this particular map. So left-click and drag the map, the link, the little shield icon, to one of the open slots. So that way, if you accidentally close it, you can bring it back up. So that's only on the this map, this overland map, because you guys aren't on that map. Not physically anyways. I could make an NPC dummy and give it like a token for your guys' group, and then drag that onto the map and use that token as a way to represent where you guys are at as a group on the map. You guys won't necessarily control it, but you'll be able to see the icon on there. So you can do stuff like that to kind of represent the group. You'd put it on the combat tracker as like a marker, or you can also do it a different way. You can make just a regular generic token. So it's better not to have it on the combat tracker because you can clutter it up with a bunch of nonsense, but that is a way you can handle that. So you can have like a token that you use to drag around on the map to represent where you're at, especially like a hex crawl or a larger regional map. In this case, we're just going to do like Theater of the Mind. It's not tactical. We don't have to worry about it. So we're just going to say that you're getting close to that junction where that dotted line is and the road meets. This is where you guys are at, right around that area, after a day's worth of travel or half a day. And then this is where the actual encounter shows up. So I'm going to bring up that. This is the goblin ambush, the infamous goblin ambush with no map. So when this first came out, they kind of, I think the design philosophy was, okay, this is the first encounter. They got to get used to playing without a tactical map. They need to role play more. So you could, in effect, run this entire encounter just out of the combat tracker with no map at all. Everyone would target, attack, save, and all that stuff from your character sheet to the combat tracker. That's how that would work. So I'm going to set up this encounter and show you the steps that I've gone through to make this more successful and to make it a little easier on you and your players. So I would have already had this in place, but one of the things I wanted to do was show how to set this up. So basically, I bring up my reference manual, which is your story and whatever you're looking at for your adventure, and go into Goblin Arrows, which is chapter 1. And then there's the Goblin Ambush, which is right after the journey from Neverwinter. So here it says this is coming from the reference manual on the GM side. It says, read the following box text to start the encounter. So I'm going to click on that. It says, you've been on the Triboard Trail for about half a day. As you come around a bend, you spot 2 dead horses sprawled about 50 feet ahead of you, blocking the path. Each has several black feathered arrows sticking out of it. The woods press close to the trail here with a steep embankment and dense thickets on either side. So this is kind of a Theater of the Mind thing. They don't link it here, but there is a beautiful picture. I don't know why they didn't do that for this encounter, but if you go in and you do a little exploring when you pick up a module that's already built for you. So I'm going to go into images, and this is something you have to do on your own. No one's going to tell you to do this. So I'm going to go to look at some of the artwork in Lost Mine of Phandelver. It actually has a separate section, and there's 4 pieces. So there's the cover, which is really neat, but this thing doesn't show up until later in the adventure, so I'm not going to mess with that. Here's the picture of the goblins that I'd already shared kind of prematurely. This one happens when you get back to Phandalin after a certain point. You're probably in Phandalin at this point. But this one is the Triboard Trail. I don't know why that's not baked in here. I guess it comes a little later. But this is an image that I can share to you guys and girls. And basically the same way, right click, go to sharing, and share the record. So this kind of matches up, minus the horses, of what you would be seeing. Right? That's a really neat looking picture. That's probably my favorite picture in this whole adventure. It just fits that description other than not having the horses on here. So that's kind of what you're looking at when you go around the corner there and you see the dead horses. That's the Tribord Trail. And it does start to pick up a little in elevation. So you go from the flat kind of coastal road to this more of this hilly kind of gnarly kind of pathway. And so it starts to go up in the foothills. So this is a Tribord Trail, essentially. So now it says, if you're using the Meet Me in Phandelver adventure hook, then any character who approaches to make a closer investigation can identify the horses as belonging to Gundren Rockseeker and Sildar Hallwinter. They've been dead about a day, and it's clear that the arrows killed the horses. When the characters inspect the scene closer, read the following. So at this point, I would probably say, okay, so you guys got this happening. What do you guys want to do? So let's do it. What do you guys want to do?
All right, who's the fighter?
Yeah.
I'm a cleric.
All right. Do you have medicine as your thing?
I want to say I took medicine.
Skill?
Well, Claren,
yeah,
other cleric does as well.
Okay. So maybe you want to investigate the horses, whether you're a fighter or not. You can use a medicine check.
I'll run up there and take a look at them.
And I'd say it's probably, 50 feet in front of you or something like that. Okay. All right, so you go up to investigate. And
I'm short and sneaky, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't tell you how to run this, but to me, reading between the lines, it says that it's clear that arrows killed the horses. And they've been dead for about a day, I guess. Yeah.
I can't heal that.
So that doesn't really give you a lot of information, right? It gives you kind of some basics. Like obviously they were attacked by something. So why don't you go ahead and go up and roll a medicine check. You can roll it in a dice tower. So you go to your skills on your character sheet.
Yes.
And you go to medicine, and on the far right there's a number. You drag that number to the dice tower. So that's your roll. Okay, so based on my side of it, you kind of look down. You see these arrows, they look kind of crude. They don't look like they're professionally made. But it does appear that these arrows killed these, so you're not learning anything new other than confirming. But you don't really have a good idea of exactly when. But based on the amount of flies that are gathering, you know that it's been at least a day. And the same thing with Elric's. He comes up, but this, in his case, you can kind of determine the exact time of death. So you look a lot closer. Maybe you kneel down. You take a look at how much larva has collected around the wound. You're looking at the flies, that kind of thing. And you're looking at the color of the blood, doing some forensics. And you realize that lots of flies. So, yeah, they've been here for a good solid 10 hours. Because normally the flies wouldn't be able to lay eggs and swarm like this right away. So you can kind of tell from that.
Yeah.
So this is not part of the adventure, right? But it is making it more immersive, and it's allowing you guys to use your skills and your observation, right?
So could I look around and see if there are any fresh tracks or any of that?
So that would be a survival check probably, but in this case you rolled perception. You rolled exceptionally well. So you do look around, and what you notice is that it looks like someone has covered up any sort of track type things. So somebody went out of their way to kind of clean the scene. That's what you're noticing.
All right.
And the only reason I'm telling you that is because you rolled exceptionally well. Otherwise, I'd just say, no, you don't see anything.
Can we tell what direction? Or is it just...
Okay. No, but it's obvious that someone went out of their way to brush away the dirt because it's too clean. Like, it doesn't look settled, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's taken a bush or something and went through and got rid of the evidence, or tried to.
Okay.
So this also might be an investigation thing. So does anyone, if you investigate, maybe you're going to go around the perimeter and maybe find that trail. You know what I mean?
I could do that. Holder can do that. So drag it over to the tower, right?
Yep, investigation. All right, so you didn't roll very well, but had you rolled well, I would have said on the north side of the road, there is a small bit of evidence, and you can see the bush or the branches that they used because they're broken, right? They broke them off of a bush. You can see that, and you also see the beginnings of a trail, and that would lead to the north. So at this point, what it says is, in the adventure part, it says the saddlebags have been looted, so there are some saddlebags if you guys looked at that. Nearby lies an empty leather map case. So at that point, if you guys, kept your investigation up, then I would spring the goblin encounter. So in Fantasy Grounds, there's a link. When you click on it, it brings up the encounter. This encounter was set up to be ran straight out of the combat tracker. No map, no nothing. They didn't even provide a map in this adventure. If you purchase the new updated Lost Mine of Phandelver that has the Phandelver and below, they change this encounter completely. They do give you a map. The horses are not dead, and they've changed everything in that particular encounter, which I wasn't very happy with. But nonetheless, in this edition, the older one, the horses are dead. You have this encounter here, and it's up to you as the GM to decide how this flows with not having a map or any sort of image to really share. So you can improvise, and that's where a little bit of experience and knowing what to do in Fantasy Grounds and in the game set or in the rule set gives you that flexibility. So technically, I would hit the down arrow, and that puts the goblins in the combat tracker. And we would run this whole thing right out of the combat tracker. So 2 of these guys are melee, and 2 of them are ranged weapons. It doesn't say that because it's just goblin 1, 2, 3, 4 in my view over here. Okay. Once I make these visible, which is done in the combat tracker with this eyeball, you can make them visible like one at a time, or I can show all of them at once. So you guys could see that in the combat tracker?
Yes.
Okay. So what you do at this point is you guys roll initiative. That's on your first sheet there. So if you go to your main tab, in the center of the character sheet is your initiative roll. If you double click that, it will record your initiative. All right, so that is basically, the first step here. So there is a point in here where you can determine if there was surprise. So what you can do is read the surprise rules, and they give you a link to it, and it pops up into the player's handbook. But you decide whether surprise was achieved or not. This can be very deadly to your group in this particular case. They took this out of the remake, but I kind of like it because it gives you that, if you got a bunch of experienced players, I'd probably roll with the surprise round. But if you got new players, this might be problematic because this encounter is so balanced with the pre-gens that it can go any way, depending on the roll of the dice. So in this case, I might take the surprise and say, okay, roll that ahead of time. So it says that in the adventure that you can go to their stat block and go to the goblin stat block. So this is where this would help to do this before the adventure starts. So if you take, like, for instance, just goblin number 1, if you guys want to look at the GM screen here, guess where it opened up?
Right in the middle.
That's right.
Right in the middle.
Smack dab in the middle. So you want to bring this over. Stretch it out a little bit. And do that for everything that's in the combat tracker initially. So just like you did with the players. And this helps when you're playing. You don't have to do this, but it really helps. Okay. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to determine ahead of time or right before we play whether these guys got the jump on you or not. So there's a stealth check thing, this roll right here. So I'm going to drag and drop that into the dice tower for myself. And that was a total of 11. So what I might do is either compare that with your passive perception of your party. So on your party sheet, on the main tab, I just take an average of your passive perception. So you have 11, 15, 12, 15, 13. So I would say that's, you guys noticed the goblins. They weren't stealthy enough or they weren't hidden enough, or maybe they made some noise or something like that. Or I could actually do that one way where I can just roll and see. So for individuals, so if I go to the party sheet, and then I plug in that number down here, which is 11. I have the visibility turned off, so you guys won't see the results. But if you're watching the GM side, you'll see this. So I'm going to click on perception here. And this will tell me pass or fail. So Hodor is fine. Let's see. Shipwreck failed. Clarin is fine. Calix is fine. So the only one who's going to lose a turn essentially is Shipwreck. So what happens is there's like a it's kind of like a surprise round. So the only person who doesn't get to go is essentially his turn.
I'm used to that. I get left out of everything.
Yeah, so you're left out. But essentially, that's kind of how you could do that. It's a couple ways you can handle it. Or you can just say, no, you're not surprised, or yes, you are surprised. Everyone. So you can do it that way. You can do it however you want. But to keep this more safer and easier and less annoying for your players, I would just take this out and I would just say that it's simultaneous. Like you guys aren't surprised. It's just a regular round. Because if they get the jump on you and they make their attack rolls and they, do some damage, you can end this really quick. So it's a very deadly encounter in this case. So that's why they took it out of the other one, because a lot of people complained about that. But that's one way to handle this. And then you would just roll and drag and drop your token or your stuff on your damage and attacks on the combat tracker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically, I'm going to start up here. This will be round 1. So Hodor, you get to go first. And since I have this organized, I can just click on this link. It brings up your sheet. So looks like you got some spells. I don't see ammo for your hand axes, so you probably got at least 2 of those.
Oh.
So change that to 2. I
wanted to do some Eldritch Blast.
That's fine. But put your ammo in there, so you got a dagger and 2...
Got it.
Yep. All right, so what you do is your Eldritch Blast, there's an attack roll, and then there's the damage. Yeah. So you should be in the mode down below. You want that in combat. There you go. Now drag that attack or cast button onto one of the goblins in the combat tracker. So that's a hit. And now you drag the damage onto that same goblin. Okay. Nice. So that thing blasts him, almost knocks him off his feet. What I would prefer, though, is after we get used to knowing how to do that, the attack and all that, I would have you describe that. So tell me what you did. Like, what did that look like?
Well, I have a staff, so just a shot of like this green electric energy just spurts out of that staff.
Nice.
And hits the goblin.
And I don't expect that every time, but once you get past like knowing where the stuff is and how it works in Fantasy Grounds, then you have more time for that. So occasionally it'd be nice if the players would give a little bit of description as to what they're doing, because it gets a little boring when you just say hit or miss, right? So, the numbers mean one thing, but looking at the numbers, that 22 is it's far exceeds what's required. So I would think that that's like a direct hit, and I would describe it that way based off of the degree of success. And then the damage you did over half the amount of damage there. So that's pretty heavy. It even says it in the combat tracker. So you almost knocked him on his butt with that blast. So he shrieks in pain. He's like, ah! So that's your turn. Now when you're done, you want to pass the turn by clicking on in the combat tracker. Yep, turn complete. There you go. Now, a little tip. Go back to your main tab and take that initiative and drag and drop it to one of your hotkeys. That way, you don't have to go back there again if you have to roll initiative. So you're going to take the initiative roll, left click and drag. You don't double click on it, just single click, left click and drag, and put it in one of your hotkeys. And when the GM asks you to roll for initiative again, you just click on the shortcut. You don't have to go all the way back to the front of your character sheet. Okay?
Yep,
the other thing I would suggest is go to and for the rest of you, do the same thing. And then go to your abilities tab on your character sheet, or excuse me, your skills tab, and just pick your top 2 skills. So perception and one other, put those also in the hotkeys. So you drag the number, not the little link, but you're going to drag the roll and drop it into one of the hotkeys. So you can roll from there instead of having to come all the way to the sheet, because you're going to spend 90% of the time on the actions tab anyways. So you might as well be able to roll it from there instead of on the sheet. Now there is an extension that will add that functionality, but that's getting into a whole nother thing. But basically though, one bad thing about making shortcuts like that is that they do not update. So if you go up in level, and let's say your proficiency bonus goes up, because that goes up occasionally, that's going to change all those totals, including potentially your initiative score might go up. You might get a ability score increase at 4th level, and you have to end up, you get a bonus to your proficiency or to your initiative. And if you don't update those links, they're static. They're not dynamic. So you have to redrag those shortcuts once in a while. So when you shortcut rolls like that, they don't update with the character. So you have to redrag those occasionally. So when you level up or you're given a magic item or something that impacts those, you need to just redrag it to the same place, and that'll update the roll. Otherwise, it's going to stay the same the whole damn game. I had a player do that. They had something, a skill like perception or something down there, and they're like, damn, I'm just shitty rolls. And I found out after a while that they never updated that. It was the same from the day they started the game. So there's little things like that'll creep up on you. But I just want you guys to know that you could shortcut those things, make it easier for you to access. And the other thing I want you to do is drag that turn complete button down to one of the hotkeys. So the actual arrow or that little button, you can use the hotkeys to also pass your turn. So you can have kind of everything in one area instead of going all over the place. Okay, so this goblin is upset. He's wounded. I mean, he's really hurt. I honestly don't know, like from my personal point of view, I would think being blasted like that, he's going to take off. So what I'm going to... Huh?
Excuse me.
Yep. So
I sneezed. Sorry.
What?
I sneezed. I apologize.
Oh, okay. So this is basically one of their features is they have nimble escape. So you blasted him. You're not necessarily close enough anyways to do an opportunity attack, but he is going to disengage and get out of there. So what I'm going to have him do is he's going to move away from this combat because he's hurt. He's basically smoldering, and he's scared. So he's only got, he's very low on health. So you can see him kind of limp off. So that's his turn, essentially. He's getting the hell out of there. And that's actually a bonus action to disengage. So he could technically turn around and attack if he wanted to. But I think in this case, since he's so wounded and hurt, he's kind of limping off, like he's getting the hell out of there. So I'm going to pass the turn. So Goblin number 2 steps up, and he sees the Hodor there. He's kind of pissed off that you hurt his friend, but he's not standing next to you. He's kind of in the distance. So he's going to return fire with the short bow. So he picks up this crude-looking short bow. Can you roll a perception, please? In the dice tower. Hodor?
Sorry. My right.
You get to looking at him as he's drawing his bow. You notice that the arrow that he has matches the ones that were in the horse. So obviously these guys had something to do with the ambush. So this kind of like little clue, like, hey, yeah, these are the guys. So it kind of confirms that. But I'm going to take the attack roll from the goblin in the actual combat tracker, drag and drop it onto Hodor here. So that is a hit. So you just kind of pulls that arrow back, and it just goes sailing into you, and it blasts you for... Ouch. Oof. So he just kind of retaliated on you for hurting his friend. And that thing just sinks into your shoulder. Wow. Got this excruciating pain. You almost regret, the whole thing happened. So you're not happy. So just kind of giving you a heads up. That arrow is now in your shoulder, and you can see the black feathers like the one sticking out of the horse. You actually look at the horse and go, shit, I'm going to be dead. So not fun. So the next goblin gets to go. So I'm going to hit next actor. And this goblin is close enough. So he's going to go after Shipwreck here. And he has a scimitar. So he kind of runs up to you. He's in melee range now. And he's going to... I'm going to drag and drop the attack roll onto Shipwreck here. And he whiffs. So he took that scimitar and he just went whoosh, and you just kind of went, whoa, kind of like went back a little ways. Like, no. So he missed, and he kind of curses in Goblin to himself. You don't know what he said, but you can tell he cursed. So he's kind of mad that he missed you. And that's basically his turn. So then I'm going to go to the next turn. So Goblin 4 is another melee attacker. So he's going to go after Clarend. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop the attack roll onto Clarend.
So when I see him coming, by the way, I have a, well, it didn't matter, but I won't confer a warding flare as a reaction against him.
Yeah, so it's a hit, or no, that's a miss, actually. So you don't even have to worry about that. So he does the same thing. He comes up to you and kind of swats at you with his scimitar, and you just kind of dodge out of the way. You're able to kind of just like, whoa, these little dudes are tough. So that's basically their turns. Now we're going to go to Elric's. So what do you want to do here?
Can I still see Goblin number 1?
Yep.
Or has he made it?
He's still in sight. He hasn't left the battlefield yet.
All right, then. I'll have a...
And he's in range.
On dice.
All right. Wow. So you threw out this bolt, so explain how that looked.
Well, I basically said I had enough of you. Popped a little fireball off my fingertips and sent it right at him.
Yeah, it looks like it sent him to his grave, too. So he goes down in a crumpling heap, and he's clutching at his body there, and he's essentially dead. He collapses. You hear him scream his death cry, ah! And then he goes down, and it's still kind of on fire, like he's smoldering a little bit, like a little bit of smoke. You guys can smell like this burnt, like flesh and burnt hair. You know that smell? Not a good, pleasant smell. So at this point, this NPC is unconscious. He's prone. Now it's up to the DM if he wants to leave it on the combat tracker or not. For myself, if I don't plan on reviving them, or if it's not a major boss or something like that, I'm going to remove him off here. So you do that by double-clicking and deleting this individual off here. So if I do that, it's going to take it off the combat tracker, and it's going to help with the clutter. You don't want to leave a bunch of dead soldiers on the field unless you, for some reason, you think you're going to revive them or maybe heal one of them. But there's no reason to leave them on there other than that. So that's kind of up to you as a GM to decide. But the less you have on the combat tracker, the better. If you've got more than 20 things on that combat tracker, it's going to slow things down, and it's going to be very unwieldy. So one of my pet peeves about Fantasy Grounds is once you load in a dozen or more combatants on here, it can really get slow. So my advice is if you got a large encounter, to break it up into pieces. So maybe do it in waves. Maybe the first round, just unleash half of them, see how they do. If they're not doing so hot, unleash the other half. Just kind of do it in stages instead of all at once. And that helps keep the combat tracker moving smoothly, and you won't get as much lag and stuff. Because you got this game isn't really set up well for mass combat. So if you've got more than 20 different entries on the combat tracker, it can really start slowing things down, especially when you're using a battle map and tokens and stuff. It really gets clunky. So I would split up. Like, this encounter is perfect for size, but let's say you had 20 goblins. I might break that up into 2 or 3 groups instead of one big encounter. And that's only a suggestion. You can do however you want, but you'll notice that the combat tracker will slow things down, and it'll get kind of laggy depending on how it's set up and how many. So, Clarence, that's good. So when you're done with your turn, you're going to pass your turn. If you're done, you want to do anything?
Yep. Well, okay. Yeah, Alex just passed it to me, so thanks, okay. Alex.
Yep.
Yeah, so not being able to see a map. So here's what I want to do. Just tell me if the map supports it. So I have a goblin in front of me. I want to, basically do an athletics bonus action to push him out of the way, so I can move to Hodor and touch him for cure wounds.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. What I'm going to do is have you roll a athletics, I guess, or acrobatics. Is it a bonus action?
I think so. I think shoving is a bonus action.
Okay. Well, either way, I'm going to let you do it because you're not attacking, right? You're just trying to get out of the way. So you can move up to at least half of your movement rate. If you can, you're going to lose 10 feet. So you can't go through your ally, but you're essentially going around or over the top of them. So you kind of do like a weird sidestep and roll around him, and you're able to kneel down and try to touch Hodor. So go ahead and drag the effect or the heal onto Hodor's combat tracker entry. So you can get close enough to heal him. There you go. So you've done your thing, right? Now on your character sheet, if it's over first level, you need to click on one of your spell slots. If it's not a cantrip, I mean. So that's how you keep track of your spells. It doesn't do it automatically. So as you use those, you have to check them off manually. And the reason for that is there's not a lot of logic to determine if you're going to cast it at a higher level and those sort of things. So, yeah, it doesn't do it automatically. But there you go. Very good. That's awesome. So how that looked is, he's engaging with you. You dodged his first attack, and then you kind of rolled around him and went down, kneeled to help Hodor. So that's kind of how that sequence went. All right, so Shipwreck.
All right, so you had one attack me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was Goblin 2, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. So is there a penalty of, I don't know how far he is from me.
Well, he's within 50 feet, so.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of bow up a little bit, raise my warhammer above my head with my right hand, lift my left arm up with my hand, cupped, but the fingers pointed towards that goblin, and cast Guiding Bolt.
Nice. Okay. So you want to, is there a attack roll? Yep. It missed. That sucked. That's a cantrip though, right? Or is it first level? Yeah, so that's not bad. You didn't waste a spell, really. You can still move, that sort of thing. Do you want to stay put, or do you want to move? It's not going to matter as much because we're kind of doing theater of the mind, but...
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay put.
Okay. All right, so basically, that's kind of the back and forth type of thing that you're going to get with combat, right? So I want to teach you guys something else that's kind of comes up. So Shipwreck, let's just pretend you did hit him, but accidentally drop it on the other goblin. Instead of number 2, let's say you did it on number 3. So drag the damage to goblin 3.
Oh crap.
That's okay. Just do the damage now. Damn. Okay, that killed him. That wasn't a really good example. I'm going to actually fix that. I just temporarily gave him more hit points. He's got 7 points of damage on him total. It should have been 12. There we go. 12 wounds. Okay, he's heavily damaged. Okay, you go, oh shit, that's the wrong guy. So what you do to fix that as a player, so I don't have to do it, is to right-click on the actual number 12 where the damage is on the combat tracker. Click that plus and minus button on the radio menu. Then drag that back to the guy that you accidentally wounded. And that's how you fix those. Okay? So occasionally that'll happen when players aren't paying attention or you got a complicated combat going on and they accidentally target the wrong person or whatever. That's going to help you manage the table so the players can do it themselves. And I guarantee you after about 3 or 4 of those, they'll stop doing that. So that helps put that back on them. So you're not you're not babysitting it every time. So that's just kind of a thing that you'll come across occasionally. But I wanted you to see that, so in case that happens, and it will, at least once.
That's perfect.
Okay, so that's something that you'll have to learn and understand, and teach your players that, because you're going to get tired of having to fix it. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's the principle, right? So that is something you can do to fix that. If they die, however, that may not fix it. So you might have to manually adjust it like I just had to.
Yeah. So when I cast that, it didn't apply the full 12 hit points of damage.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, it did because you exceeded his 7 hit points. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So it canceled out at 7 because he died. It would have if he had more hit points. That's why it ended up like that. I had to manually intervene in that case because he died. But had he had more hit points and he didn't die, it would have worked out just fine.
Okay.
All right. So that's one way to do combat, and that's sort of what you might want to do initially when you're learning Fantasy Grounds, is just kind of do everything through the combat tracker to get used to how to use it. You don't necessarily need a map. You're going to use Theater of the Mind. You're going to use it to get used to how to manage the combat tracker and all the little nuances that go on with it. So try it through there first. So you're not even dealing with a map right now. You're just dealing with the combat tracker and the character sheet. That's so much easier at this point because you're not worried about where they are. You're not thinking about cover. You know, you're kind of making it up as you go. It's more cinematic. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff, right? So it does sound a little dumbed down, but it does help when you're learning the program. Use this combat tracker for a while, just in itself. Don't worry about the maps. Don't worry about all that stuff. Just learn how to use the combat tracker, how to pass your turns, how to fix stuff. You know, learn all that stuff before you start introducing battle maps, because that's a whole nother thing to add onto your table. So the first few encounters, I would just set them up to be like this and run them as Theater of the Mind. That's my suggestion.
Makes sense.
And that's only just so you get the hang of it. You'll get the map later. You can always add that stuff in as you go. So I will kind of go through that, and then we'll call it a day. So I'm going to reset this whole thing. So I'm just going to say that you guys kick the goblins' asses and you're going to rest. So to get rid of the goblins, whether they're dead or not, I can go to the menu, go to delete from tracker, and delete only foes. That's going to wipe all those guys out. For the menu, so you guys can rest, is we'll say you guys are going to take a short rest at least after that encounter. Maybe spend an hour getting cleaned up, attending wounds, more investigation, maybe looting the bodies, whatever. So I'm going to go to menu and then go to rest, and then you have the long or short rest option. So I'm going to do short rest. And if you had any abilities that you had used that were able to be reset on a short rest, those would come back or reset. If we did a long rest, your spell slots would come back. So I'll do that. So we're going to, so you guys decide that, we want to just call it a day and just camp out, recollect ourselves. So for the long rest, I'll go to rest, and then I'll go to the long rest. And if you take a look at your actions tab, if you used any spell slots or any abilities or anything, when I do that, it's going to reset. It's going to put everything back the way it was. And that's because those are set for, for a long rest. So it will reset some of your usages depending on how they're set up. And then if you have any wounds left over, or maybe during a short rest, you wanted to use one of your hit die recovery, on the front page of your character sheet, down at the very bottom, there's a HD. You can use that to heal as well, and it will recover after a couple rests. But essentially, that's kind of like your Hail Mary there to heal naturally after combat. So if you use that up, that die will disappear. It increases as you level up, but nonetheless, that's an option as well for a short rest. You can use one of your hit die recovery and heal yourself. So there's that option. So the other way to handle this, if you want to do this combat encounter with a little bit more finesse and flair, and you kind of want to include a tactical battle map, because you're not, Theater of the Mind works okay, but there's some situations where you don't want to just use the combat tracker. A lot of the newer rule sets, like the 2D20, like Alien, those things, they kind of use more of this narrative kind of combat. You don't normally have a tactical map. You'll have like a zone map where it's like, yep, no problem. So basically this is just a way that you can kind of get around not having a map, because this one didn't come with a map. Now you can find maps online. You can make your own. If you have the Fantasy Grounds map tool assets, you can kind of build your own thing. But in this case, I'm going to use this image. So the Triboard Trail image that I had given you, that I shared earlier, I'm going to use that as the battle map. Even though it's really not, you can use any photo you want. So this works pretty good because it's immersion. Like you got to get the picture of where you're fighting, but then you're also going to have a space to put your tokens and stuff. So I'm going to unlock this map, and I'm going to put a grid on it. So that's the first thing you do. So I'll go to the grid. I'm going to turn it on, and there essentially is that. Let me see something here. So I put a grid on it. And then what I'm going to do is, I was kind of playing around with the scale. I think that's fine. I'm going to change the color of the grid because it's a little washed out with that gray. You notice? So I unlocked the image. I went to the grid area, turned on the visibility of the grid, and now I'm going to tint, and I'm just going to recolor the grid a little bit so that I can actually see it, and then play around with the opacity. It's just so I can barely see it, but I can still see it. You know, I don't want it covering everything. And then at this point, I would set up the encounter and my player. So this would happen before we started the combat or before we were playing. So in the, remember the order tab that we had in the party sheet? So I would set this up in such a way something like that, or maybe like that. And then you could take this shield, you drag and drop this, and that will keep the order. And you have to be in play mode to interact with the tokens on the top level. So if you're editing the map or doing anything else, you won't be able to move the tokens. So now we have those on the battle map. So now I'm going to share the image, even with the players, even if you weren't connected. I'm going to right click and go to sharing and share this image. Okay, so this is the tactical map, or like your battle map. Can you guys see it?
Yep, popped right up.
Okay, so what I want you to do is size it. So take the bottom right corner and put it to what size you want and place it. That's the first thing you want to do with a shared image, especially a map, is you want to put it in a place where you can access it. It's not going to be covering 50 other things, and you're able to get to it. That's the first thing you do. What do you think the second thing to do is?
I'm sure it involves one of those buttons.
Well, I want you to bookmark it.
Putting it on the,
yeah, put it on the taskbar or the cheat sheet there on the bottom. So left click and drag that link to the hotkeys. Replace the other image if you have to. This is just for your convenience in case you close it. There are other ways to deal with this, but that's just one way. Okay, now that you've done that, go ahead and close the map. And now there's a couple things you can do. You can double click in the combat tracker on your portrait. So on the far left in the combat tracker, if you double click on your portrait photo, it can bring up the map. Or if that's not working because they've changed that behavior, on your character sheet, you can double click and it should bring up the map. I don't know which one works because they've changed the behavior. Did either of those work for you guys? Bring the map back up?
Yeah, clicking it on the combat tracker works. If you click it on the portrait, just the portrait pops up.
Okay, so they changed that behavior. You used to be able to click on that and it would bring up the map. But that's fine. So the combat tracker still works, so you can double click on that. That brings the image back up. So you either make a bookmark or just remember that you can do that to bring the map back up. That's a typical thing. Your players will say, oh, I closed the map. Why did you close it? I don't know. Well, how do I get it back up? Well, you either bookmark it or you double click on your portrait picture in the combat tracker. The very common thing. All right, so the other thing to do on the encounter side of things is you have this encounter, it's embedded into the module in the actual section where the encounter shows up. Okay, so there's a pop-up, there's the encounter, that's the one we used earlier. I hit the down arrow, it put the goblins on there. So they're not attached to anything in particular. But if you wanted to place these ahead of time, or you wanted to make any adjustments, you can do that. So I'm going to cover a few things here. I don't expect you to remember all this, but there's some flexibility here. So I'm going to unlock the encounter, and I'm going to split this up into 2 groups. And the reason I'm doing this is because the description of the battle, it tells you after the surprise, it says that when it comes time for the goblins to act, 2 of them rush forward and make melee attacks, while 2 goblins stand 30 feet away from the party and make ranged attacks. The goblin's stat block contains the information you need to resolve these. For more information, go to combat, blah, blah, blah. When 3 goblins are defeated, the last goblin attempts to flee heading to the goblin trail, which is something you guys had discovered a little earlier. So what I'm going to do is split this up. So I'm going to have 2 and 2 here. And this one, I'm going to say melee. And ranged. And if you don't like these icons or these tokens, you can do so. You can change those. So if you have the assets, you go into your assets folder, click on tokens, and I'm going to dread doing this, but I'm going to search for goblin.
And show us that you have 97 of those in there somewhere?
Yes. It's probably the worst search term ever in this case. As you can see, my screen's going white here. It's freaking out because it's tough. It's hard on it because it has to build.
Clearly, you have enough of them.
Yeah. So what Fantasy Grounds is doing right now is it has to build all the thumbnails. It's searching through the data and it's building all the preview thumbnails. And this is the reason why you don't want. This is the reason why you don't want a gazillion of these. Is because of that reason. Like it's going to take forever for it to create those thumbnails. That's why you don't want to have 50 gazillion of these. So.
I have to find my delete key now.
Yeah. All right. So we're just going to pick out a couple different varieties of goblins. They don't have to be perfect, but here's one with some swords. So I'll use that one for the melee. And I'll find one that has like a bow, or maybe we'll just do a spear. I don't care. I'll just do the spear. So now we have some variation here on these 2 types of goblins. And that way I can kind of keep track of them a little better if you're going to do a tactical battle. So at this point, I'm going to link this encounter to the image. And I'm doing that for easier recall. So when we get to this point, when I got, get to my prep work, I'm going to have this encounter. It's going to be attached to this image because that's where the encounter is going to take place. And then I'm going to drag each individual token based on the description here in the context of this, because it says there's 2 on either side of the road, so 2 sets. So I'm going to go with a melee, go with one here, and go with another one over here. So that's those 2, they're placed. Now the ranged attacks, let's set a guy over here and a guy over there. So once you have those placed, when you close the map, or when you close the encounter, they'll disappear off the map, which is fine because when your players come on the map, they're not going to be able to see them anyways. However, when you go to run this encounter, let's say you guys sign onto the table and we're going to run this encounter. So if you have this set up, I can bring up the encounter, click the down arrow, and they're going to be on the map where I set them. And then we're ready to go. So all of the goblins are on here. They're kind of hard to see because they're grayed out, but they're there. So this is kind of a planned encounter, and it's tactical. So you got your starting locations. Players are in their starting locations. And we would run this the same way we did with that first one, except for we would be doing targeting and, you can do your movement. So we'll do a little bit of that because I want to show you some of the things that can go wrong here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just say that the goblins are visible. So I'll turn them all on at once. So can you guys see that on the map now a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So they should be visible. Now what I'm going to do is this first goblin is going to move closer to engage you guys' party. So as the game master, I have to hold down the Alt key in order to see the movement. If I just move it, it'll just do it. Like a player, when they move their token, if the map is locked, it will create a line or, like a waypoint. But if I want that same effect, I have to hold the Alt key initially while I'm moving it. So he's moved 15 feet. I don't have to keep holding the Alt key at this point once I've started it. That's as far as he can move. So then I'll approve it. And I just go down the list and do that same thing. So he can move 35 feet or so, 30 feet. Hold down the Alt key. Now he's actually in range. So I can execute the attack by either doing the same thing we did before, using the drag and drop on the combat tracker, which sometimes is easier, or I can take this scimitar and drag and drop it on the token itself. Missed. So you can do it that way. So you progressively go through and do this for all the different goblins and players. Now you notice the map is moving around. So that is because it's trying to center on the next token or whoever's turn it is. If you don't want that, you can go in the options and you can turn that setting off. So it's called turn auto center map. So I'm going to turn it off as the GM because I don't want it to move and I want to keep the map centered so I can see the whole thing. I don't want it to keep moving on me like that. That's why I turn that off. It's per user, so you don't, you can decide if you want to do that or not. So the next thing is I wanted to show you is some targeting issues that come up quite a bit. So for instance, this guy here, it's his turn. I want to attack Shipwreck. So I have a short bow. Its range is 80 to 30 feet. So if I hold the control key and click on shipwreck, I have to make sure I first click on the token to select it, and then hold down the right control key, and that'll give me the distance between the two. See, before I just clicked on the targeting and it was still selected on the old target. You got to make sure that you claim the token first, and then you hold down the control key and click on your target. So that's targeting. So you know he's 40 feet away, and once he's targeted, you don't have to drag the damage or anything. I can just double click now on the attack roll for the short bow. He rolled a 1, so he missed. But had he not, then I can just double click on the damage, and it would apply the damage. So when you target, you don't have to drag and drop as much. However, you have to untarget it as well when you're done. So if you're not going to keep attacking the same target, to undo it, make sure you have the token selected, and then you're going to hold down the control key and click again, and that removes the target. Or conversely, you can also remove it from the combat tracker. So this goblin has shipwreck targeted. So if I come over to the targets area on shipwreck's character sheet entry in the combat tracker, there's this little thing here where you can manage that. And I do so for the goblin, he has shipwreck here targeted. So I can clear the target just by clicking that. So there's two ways to remove targeting. You can either do it through here, or you can do it on the map. So targeting goes wrong when you forget to target the right target. You end up clicking on yourself or your ally, and it'll also go wrong if you you don't target and you target something else. So basically, targeting and untargeting is the same action. You just got to remember to undo it when you're done. So that's the target. I got it held down, clicking, and I have this selected. And then to do, if I still have it selected, then I can untarget when I'm done. So that's one thing. Unless you're going to plan on, attacking that same target over and over, you can untarget. That's usually what people forget, to untarget their last. If they killed someone, they'll leave it targeted even though it's dead, and then they'll try to do the same thing with the next target, and it doesn't work. It's still attacking the guy that's already dead. So that's the only thing about the targeting and untargeting, is that can get a little bit confusing at first, and it can be kind of annoying. So one of the biggest problems that people have with this type of tactical battle map is when you start using the line of sight and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to put a real simple wall up just so we can kind of see the problem with it. So right now there's no line of sight on here. Okay, it's just an image. This is probably the easiest method here. You just slap a grid on it, you're good. When you want to start adding lighting and obstacles and that sort of thing, it can get a little bit complicated. So my suggestion is, if you just have an image and you just want to show, let's see, you just want to show the kind of like areas explored. Let's say you're on an area map. What you can do is add a mask. So that basically blots that out. And you just left click and drag to unveil the area that you want them to see. It doesn't stop movement. There's no sunlight stuff. This just kind of gives you a way to block out areas without having to get too fancy. This is the way that Fantasy Grounds Classic used to work. So this is what we had. Before you had line of sight and all that other stuff, this is basically how Fantasy Grounds worked. You would unveil the areas that they explore as they explore. That's the easiest way to do it. Now you can also remove the mask by disabling it, that sort of thing. You can also hold down the Alt key and recover. So if you expose an area, you can cover it back up by holding down the Alt key when you retrace over it. So there's that. Now I'm going to put an occluder in here to kind of show you some of the problems that happen with managing tables. So I'm not going to put anything fancy in here, but I'm going to go to the line of sight tool, and I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm going to have a wall. I'm just going to put it in the middle here. Okay, so this is the occluder. It's not going to allow movement, and it's not going to allow the bright shining light to go through it. Now I'm going to go back to play mode, and you have to turn on the line of sight mode, and the lighting has to be enabled for the occluders. So can you guys see it on a map now?
I just see my token.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a big dark spot up there now. And
Yep.
Turn the image gray.
Yep. So go ahead and move your token, if you can see it, off to the side. So drag your token away from that shadow, or in the shadows, however you want to do it. And now I'm going to approve your movements. Now what you're going to see is the GM is going to get a little bit confusing. It's hard to tell whose token is whose when you are in the standard GM mode. Okay? And the reason for that is because you're not really looking through the eyes of that character. You're kind of got this overview. So what I normally do is I will run it in player preview mode, which is really what the player sees. And when I select a different token, I get a different view based off of that. So this guy, Hodor, doesn't have any light, so you can't see Jack.
Question for you.
But Shipwreck and Elric's have dark vision, so they can see. So let me turn. Huh?
A second. Can you open a second map?
What do you mean?
Like you have this one open right now. Could you open up the second?
Yes. Yes.
A separate one that would show you the overall for yourself.
You could, yeah. You could do that, but you don't have to because you can toggle. I can hit Control Tab or Control P. So that gives me the preview. So I don't need a second map. Were you able to see that?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Most people run it with the player preview turned like this, and you can see the whole map, and then you would hit Control P when you want to see what the players see. I run it the opposite. I usually run it with it turned on, and then when I need to see the whole map, I'll hit the Control P. The biggest thing, though, for a GM, the confusing part, is selecting token. You have to select through the character so that you can see what they're seeing. The combat tracker doesn't change the vision. It's selecting or highlighting the token. So like here's a goblin, here's the other goblin. That's how you change the view. And that's important as a GM to know that. Once you understand that, it gets a little easier to use those. Now for Hodor, since we're outside, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the lights for him. So I'm going to go to the lighting tool, go to the ambient lights, and I'm going to change it to dusk. Now we got a little bit of light there. Okay, so this is your outdoor lighting. Is that better, Hodor?
Yep.
So now you can kind of see what's going on. So as a player, you normally only have 1 or 2 tokens. You just have to select it and you'll be fine. As a GM, though, you got to switch between the actors to get an idea of what they're seeing. And that's usually where the confusion comes in. So when you move your turn on the combat tracker, even though it selects the next player, it doesn't select the vision. So if I go to Hodor, it's on his right now because I had it selected. But if I go to Shipwreck, yeah, it's his turn, but I'm still looking through Hodor's view. I need to click on Shipwreck in order to see what he's looking at. I kind of wish it would switch with the, with the combat tracker view, but I can see why they wouldn't do it too. And it depends on the view and what mode you're in. So So that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. Or in the case where we didn't have any light, poor Hodor there doesn't have a light source. So obviously he's not going to see anything. Seen people in the forum say, hey, my token can't see, I can't see anything. Well, do you have a torch? Is it dark? Do you have, do you have dark vision? Sometimes it's because the map isn't set up right. There's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong there. And I think a lot of it, though, has to do with the viewpoint and also knowing that you need a light source when it's dark. I think people get used to just being able to see everything. When you introduce these shadows and the darkness and all that stuff, it can get a little bit of confusion going on there, especially for the GMs. So you guys got to kind of be careful with these battle maps. They can get a little tricky sometimes. Another thing is, let's just say your player here, he wants to move, but what I'll see is since he doesn't really know that's a wall, he's going to try to move through it because he doesn't know that it's a wall. So I'm going to go ahead and trace. Go ahead and move straight east there, Elrix. Just move straight east, okay? You see that on the map now, how that thing's there? So as the game master, I should probably deny that and tell him, hey, that's a wall actually. So you're going to have to move somewhere else. It's really hard to tell as a player, especially if this line of sight is right up to the edge of the wall. There's no indicator that there's an obstacle there. If I hit approve, it's just going to get stuck in the wall. Then I have to move it out and fix that. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. If you want to move someone through this wall quickly and not have to go all the way around, you hold the shift key down as the GM and you can move them through obstacles. Only the GM can do that. So you hold shift, move the token, it goes through any obstacle. It overrides the occluders. If you don't do that, you got to go move around the wall. You got to move like this. Okay? Any questions? I think we're going to call it because this is essentially most of the crap that you need to know that's going to give you problems. Character creation, combat tracker, how to manage these characters and such, and how to deal with these battle maps. That's your biggest challenges.
What about spells that would affect an area?
Okay. So do you have any?
I've got Bless.
Okay. Let's do that. So this was that Shipwreck?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to bring up your sheet. Let's look at the description. Okay. So click on the...
it's not an AoE, it's individuals, but it's...
Yeah, it's still range 30 feet. Okay, so what you want to do is you're going to target your allies and then yourself. Okay? So hold down the control key and then click on the people, the individuals that you want to cast. So you're going to select them. So hold down the control key and click on the targets, your allies.
All right.
Yep. There you go. Now what you're going to do is click on the effect on your actions tab. And you see it applied that effect on your player. So that will add the 1d4 to your attack and the 1d4 bonus to your saves. It lasts for 10 rounds, what the d10 is. And that C is concentration. So if you receive damage and you don't maintain concentration, it's going to cancel that effect out. So I'm going to simulate that. So I'm going to go to one of these goblins here, and I'm going to do some damage just to show you. So you succeeded at the concentration check, so that maintains the effect. Had you failed, it would drop that effect. So that's a powerful thing that Fantasy Grounds can do for you.
Very
so
nice.
if you have concentration like spells and it's correctly made, it will maintain concentration. So area of effect, let's do that. So if you wanted to, let's say the bless spell, and you wanted to know the 30 feet away, let's say it's a radius, just for this argument's sake. So you right click on the map, somewhere where your token is not, and then you go to pointers, and then you click on the draw circle, and then you left click and drag until you get your radius. We'll say 30 feet. So right click on the map, go to the pointers, click on the radius if that's what it is, and then left click on the map and drag to make the circle. Yep. And then you can move it from the center. So if you click on the center, you should be able to move that radius. Yep. It's like that.
All right.
That's how you do area of effect. Now there are extensions that will add that functionality and do lots of fancier things with it, but that's the raw kind of basic way to use it. It doesn't do anything mechanically. It just kind of represents the area of effect. There are extensions out there that'll do more. It'll actually highlight the users and all kinds of stuff. So it just depends on your familiarity and comfort with Fantasy Grounds. But this is how the base program works. It's good to learn this first and then move on to the other stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yep. To get rid of it, you right click, go to pointers, and you can remove your own pointer.
So on my screen, I have the pointers from me to Elric's and Hodor. I assume because I cast.
Oh yeah, you cast that. You targeted them, so untarget them. So hold down the control key and click on them again. That will untarget them.
Okay, that did it.
Yeah, that's something you got to remember to do. That's where players often have problems. They forget. So then you do something else and you end up doing something wrong, or doing the wrong thing. Anyways,
and not understanding why.
Exactly.
I get it.
So, anything else? I mean, I'm sure there's tons of other things. I don't know if we can get into that. We've been going for, 3, almost 4 hours now.
Yeah, I kind of need to go, but thank you so much. This was really helpful.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys kind of get an idea of how this can work. It's going to be a little different in other rule sets, but in general, this is kind of the flow of things.
No, that was very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I left you guys some resources in Classroom 1 in the Fantasy Grounds Academy Discord. There's like a couple PDFs and some links. Use the Atlassian guide when you're poking around and you don't know what's better to do. Go through all those little things and click on some buttons and see what they do. You do all this before you start playing a game. And it really helps you get used to where things are at. You kind of get like a muscle memory, and just kind of get used to setting your table up so that it's easier to get to things. If you look at my screen there, look how I have that. It's organized. Things aren't covering each other. I can quickly get to the players and to the NPCs.
Yep.
I don't know why those moved. I probably moved them out of the way, but get out of that habit. If you need this space, close it. Don't move it, because you want to preserve the space.
Yeah.
So the proper way to exit is, how do you exit out of Fantasy Grounds?
Right click the desk. Exit session.
Return to launch.
That's right. If you do that, you're less likely to get corruption. If you just X out, and Fantasy Grounds is in the middle of a save cycle, like it'll save every 5 minutes, it'll corrupt the session potentially. especially on the GM side. So right click, exit session, return to launcher.
All right, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leland.
Yep. So I'm going to hit load, and I'm going to go back into the game, and you can actually, everything I left open should pop up again. That's what's nice about that setting that I had mentioned before. You could turn that on, and it kind of restores your desktop the way you had it when you left.
Yeah.
It used to be a separate
you made that
extension.
Point abundantly clear yesterday.
What's that?
You made that point abundantly clear yesterday. I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's just little stupid things like that that really make things easier and less frustrating.
It's the quality of life things, right? And that's the one.
Yes.
It's just, if everything keeps opening up in the same damn thing, it's like
Yeah.
Windows, when you delete a file, it always pops that thing up in the same location.
Yep. You want it in that, try to set things up to where it's, where it's going to go. And that's usually the first couple sessions. You won't know until you know. So that's, you won't really learn that until you go through this. So there, everything's back the way I had it. All right, guys, I'm going to call it.
Great, thank you.
This has been recorded. You can go back and watch it. Once YouTube is done doing its algorithm crap and doing that, I'll set up some timestamps so that, people don't have to go through the whole video. And then we'll call it that. And I'll link the first video to that video. So, whoever's watching this in the future, hopefully this is helpful. Sorry it was 4 hours long, but there's a lot of stuff to cover. And I could break it up into, 4 sessions, but you guys want to come back 4 times? Anyways.
Well, that's the thing with any powerful program is a learning curve.
And this kind of stuff doesn't always make good content, right? I always get people that ask me, like, did you record it? Is there a recording somewhere? No. And the reason for that is when I put it up on YouTube, you got people bitching that it's too long. I should have went in and edited it, and I should have had lighting, and I should have done this, I should have done that. And I said, you know what? Screw you. Find your own damn video to edit. You spend 8 hours. What's that?
To tell them if it's too long, don't watch it.
Yeah. Or fast forward. It's not that hard. And it acts like it's a professional production here. I don't profess that, I'm a professional. I just do it for the help that people out, and you take what you need out of it. I'm not doing this for glory. It's not for growing my channel, and I need to have, I don't. I'm doing this for the sake of the game. I want people to play. I don't want to dick around with Fantasy Grounds, and you know what I mean? I want to play. I don't want to deal with all this stuff. And that's kind of why I'm trying to make it easier.
Well, it was definitely useful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good night, you guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.